Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Kentucky to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator Adam Keller. Today, we talk to a rural mail carrier ahead of their convention next week. A striking CWA member at AT&T gives us an update on their strike, and we educate a local radio host about taxes. All that and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show today, we've got a phone number and the line is open. There's this guy who has been in our comments pretty regularly over the last couple of weeks on YouTube. Would love for him to call in. That would be incredibly fun. That phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also leave a voicemail throughout the week, and we might respond on the next program if you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio. Or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, then you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, tvlr.fm. But we are also on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at the Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. So if you want to become a sustaining donor to the program or just make a one-time contribution, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate or patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. We got a bunch of cool merch for sale at our store, tvlr.fm/store. We've got our logo dad cap. We have some of our Join a Union t-shirts left. We've got a bunch of stickers, and pre-orders are open for our union-made matchbooks, which is an incredibly cool thing that I saw somebody talk about on Twitter, and I was like, oh, wow. That is really cool. We should do that. And so we did it. The matchbooks say fire your boss. It looks really cool. Check it out, tvlr.fm/store. And obviously it's going to have a union bug on it. It's union made. So, you know, if you smoke a pipe, if you smoke cigarettes, if you like to do campfires, then you should do it with a union-made match. I mean, man, how cool is that? We also have a new t-shirt for sale that says Unionize, but it's like the Supreme logo. You know what I'm talking about? Those t-shirts that say Supreme on it. We got one in that same kind of style, but it says Unionize. It's really cool. It's on pre-order, tvlr.fm/store. Also, folks, we are in the middle of a fundraising drive. We have a goal of about $10,000 that we want to raise. I know it sounds like a lot, but that's about what we need to get out of this drive. Our expenses between studio rental, labor, radio airtime, all of that kind of stuff, even as Adam and myself maintain our volunteer status. We do not make any money from this program, but we do pay other people for their behind-the-scenes kind of work, and all of our expenses combined equals something approximating $5,000 a month. So that will help us significantly be, if we are able to meet our $10,000 goal, it'll help us be less reliant on sponsors. It'll fill some funding gaps that have opened up as some sponsors have fallen off or not renewed, or as we wait to get renewals, et cetera, et cetera. So, if you've got the funds, then please do think about contributing to the campaign at tvlr.fm/donate. tvlr.fm/union2024. That's tvlr.fm/union2024. If you do not have the funds, then please share our work. Share the fundraiser, all of that good stuff. Obviously, if you don't have the funds, don't expect you to contribute financially, but you can support us in other ways. And finally, folks, if you're a member of a union, then please do think about getting your local union or your international union or your district council or your state council or whatever. Get your union somehow to sponsor the show. We could not do this without without the support of organized labor. It's really important. So like I said, if you're a member of a union, then please do think about doing that. You can reach out to us for more details on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate that, Jacob. And let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, Unclaimed Mysteries Internet Radio, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WMMT, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network, so if you dig this program and you want to find more like it, I encourage you to check that out. And most of you know that we are not media professionals. We're just some diehard union brothers who really want to put Alabama and the South's labor movement on the map. We think that the working class deserves a bigger platform, and we're hoping to make a difference on that front with this project. We can't do it without your support, so we really appreciate everyone tuning in today. Whether you're a loyal fan or a first-time listener, appreciate you spending some time with us.
That's right, folks. So I have been... Folks, we have been so busy. There's been so much stuff going on. We had our Union Summer School last weekend, so we pre-taped the program, and I have been in Houston all week for work. While I was there for work in the afternoons, after work hours, was not doing this on the clock, but after work hours, I met with some union folks over in Houston, had a really good time, but I'm a little behind on doing my the whole Last Week in Southern Labor thing. I've got a good bit of it, but instead of opening with Last Week in Southern Labor, I'm going to have Adam talk to us about Medicaid while I put in a few extra last-minute things into the roundup of Last Week in Southern Labor. But y'all know we haven't done Last Week in Southern Labor for 2 weeks, and so there is just a ridiculous amount of stuff. I will not be able to put everything that I want to put into it before I read this on the air. So if you want to get the full roundup for Last Week in Southern Labor, you need to subscribe. You need to subscribe to the newsletter. It comes out, this segment, Last Week in Southern Labor, Last Week in Southern Labor, as a newsletter every single Tuesday afternoon. Every single Tuesday afternoon, we put this out and right to your email inbox. So if you want to get the full thing of Last Week in Southern Labor, you got to subscribe. tvlr.fm/contact. Send us a note that you want to be added to the email list, and we'll put you on it, and you'll get the full thing. You'll get the full experience. But in the meantime, Adam, there's been some updates not updates on Medicaid expansion, but there has been some news recently that has really underscored the importance of Medicaid expansion. What's been going on?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple things that, caught my eye recently. One was that there was a new study by a nonprofit tech company, and it ranked Alabama as one of the worst states for poverty support in the country. Surprise, surprise. Smile Hub is the name of it, and it rates charities and provides resources to help donors and maximize the impact of their contributions. And so it looks at, states across the country and what do they have in terms of poverty supports. Alabama ranked 48th overall in the study, which measured 20 metrics across 3 dimensions. And that comes amid some more bad news when it comes to poor and working class folks here in the state. A rural hospital in South Alabama called Grove Hill Memorial Hospital just closed its labor and delivery department last week. As a result, women from the area may have to drive more than an hour to deliver their babies. This is dangerous for both mothers and their babies. Evidence shows that the farther a woman must travel, the more dangerous it is for both, and it could actually cost their lives. So unfortunately, this is just the latest in a series of birthing unit closures in Alabama. At least 4 hospitals have closed their labor and delivery departments since October of 2023, right? Less than a year. So, and there's even more that are struggling to keep their doors open. More than 1/3 of Alabama counties are maternity care deserts, with some people having to drive up to 100 miles to reach the nearest labor and delivery department. The lack of essential delivery and prenatal care in the Black Belt and other areas worsens the state's maternal and infant health disparities, especially for women with low incomes. However, expanding Medicaid could help keep labor and delivery units open by improving hospitals' overall finances. Medicaid expansion would increase the number of insured patients, reducing the amount of uncompensated care that hospitals provide. This increased financial stability would help keep labor and delivery units operational. There's research showing that a rural hospital located in a Medicaid expansion state decreases the likelihood it will close by an average of 62%, right? So we know for a fact that expanding Medicaid helps keep rural hospitals open. Rural hospitals in states that have expanded Medicaid coverage have more sustainable median operating margins compared with rural hospitals in non-expansion states. And it's worth pointing out that Alabama has the highest maternal mortality rate in the nation. Similarly, Alabama's infant death rates are higher than those in most other states. Alabama has the nation's 3rd highest infant death rate. Black infants and black mothers experience higher mortality rates than their white and Hispanic counterparts in Alabama. In fact, the infant mortality rate for black babies is 1.5 times higher than the state average, and nearly twice as high as the infant mortality rate for white babies. Similarly, black mothers in Alabama are twice as likely to die during childbirth as their white counterparts. Medicaid expansion can help address the high maternal mortality rate and the health disparities in Alabama by ensuring continuous coverage before, during, and after pregnancy. Medicaid expansion would provide more women with access to regular prenatal checkups, leading to early detection and management of potential health issues for both the mother and the baby. Research shows that adoption of Medicaid expansion is associated with lower rates of maternal mortality and reduction in infant mortality as well. Medicaid expansion has also been found to increase preconception health counseling, folic acid intake, and postpartum contraception. So it doesn't have to be this way. With healthcare deserts and high mortality rates, our state is keeping people from accessing affordable health coverage they can get in 40 other states in this country. Expanding Medicaid is an opportunity to ensure more Alabamians, regardless of where they live, have a fighting chance to stay healthy and raise thriving families. You know, Medicaid is a state and federal health insurance program. It serves more than 80 million people, including adults and families with low incomes, people with complex health needs and disabilities, and people over the age of 65. As you may remember, the Affordable Care Act back in 2010 required all states to expand Medicaid coverage to adults with incomes up to 138% of the federal poverty level, which is about $20,000 last year in 2023 for a single individual. However, 2 years later, the Supreme Court decided that states are not required to do the expansion. It made it optional. And so Alabama is one of 10 states that has refused to expand its Medicaid program. As a result, hundreds of thousands of Alabamians are without life-saving health insurance, and they fall into the health care coverage gap. They earn too much money to qualify for Medicaid as it is, incredibly strict under this state, but not enough to be eligible to get financial help to buy private insurance. These are hardworking folks who are left with very few options for affordable health coverage. So to close that gap, there is a diverse coalition that has come together to form Cover Alabama, urging the state to expand Medicaid. Highly recommend listeners go to coveralabama.org. You can find out more there. You can get connected with your lawmakers. If it's been a while since you've reminded them of how important this issue is, I definitely encourage you to do that. Now's a great time to reach out to them. And I also just wanted to point out the economic impact of Medicaid expansion. Just in my county of Limestone County, expanding Medicaid would bring an additional $327 million in additional economic impact, right? Just in one county alone. The numbers across the state are huge. Medicaid expansion could create 20,000 new jobs. right? So even if you're one of those folks who frankly doesn't care about the moral argument, you're not concerned that our neighbors are dying and are suffering needlessly, think about the economic impact and nothing else. It will grow the state's economy. It will keep hospitals in business. It will grow new jobs, right? More folks can participate in the workforce because they'll be healthier. So it'll grow our workforce participation rate. And it's going to decrease the amount of people who have medical debt in collections. About 1 in 5 folks in the state are in collections for medical debt, right? That is something we could help alleviate with Medicaid expansion. So I could go on and on. There's a lot of reasons why our state should do this. And I encourage everybody to get involved with that and to get plugged in. Again, you can go to coveralabama.org. You can find out more there. But I highly encourage folks to get involved in this struggle because there are hundreds of thousands of our neighbors who are suffering, and they don't have to. And we could all benefit. We could all grow this economy from the bottom up by taking care of folks.
Yep. That's exactly right, Adam. Appreciate that update. We're going to take a break really quick. We're going to be right back with a rural mail carrier from Texas to talk to us about the convention of the National Rural Carriers Association next week and some updates or the lack of updates on their contract negotiations. Where that's going to sound familiar to folks. The National Association of Letter Carriers, which represents city carriers, are also in contract negotiations with the Postal Service, and also have had a lack of updates around those negotiations. So we're going to take a break really quick. We'll be right back with that rural carrier from Texas. Stay tuned.
Benefit Architects has proudly supported union members and union-made products for over 35 years. If you are a federal employee and an AFGE member, you're eligible for hundreds of dollars in money-saving benefits, including group life insurance, dental insurance, and AFLAC insurance. Additionally, if you're a union member but don't work for the federal government, you can still qualify for several of these money-saving policies. So give Tate Hure a call at 256-215-6769 for details and to enroll. Again, that is Tate Hure at 256-215-6769.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and family members are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough even to keep their jobs. We can fix this. It's time for us to find a way to close the health care coverage gap so that people can remain at work. Let's make this a priority. Let's close this gap and cover Alabama. To learn more and how you can help, visit coveralabama.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth should go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. If you've got anything to add, you can give us a call. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. And we would love to get more callers. You know, we get callers sometimes, but we love, we love being able to listen to folks. And I don't know what's going on with the never mind. We love being able to listen to folks. Love even and honestly, especially, I would love to get more calls disagreeing with us. I think that would be fun. So if you're shy, then don't be shy. Don't be shy. Call in 844-899-TVLR and ask us a question about topics that we've been talking about or anything else, particularly as it relates to unions. Always interested in talking about stuff like that. So, have we got Jake in the Zoom?
No, we do not.
Don't have the letter carrier in the Zoom. That's okay, though. We got plenty of stuff to talk about. So,
yeah, I'll let you know when he pops in.
Okay, yeah. Let's do that. Let's talk about this this tax stuff, because this was really, I was so hoping that I would get a response out of this, and I did. So I'm going to talk about it. So Kamala Harris wants to eat the rich. Kamala Harris wants to tax millionaires out of existence. Kamala Harris is a Marxist.
What?
Yeah, that's what some folks are saying about her new tax plan, including right here in Alabama. Now, the way that they're going to do this is they're going to shout the proposed top marginal tax rate on capital gains and not mention that it's a marginal tax rate. Nobody is going to pay this top amount on all of their income. So they'll tell you the higher proposed marginal tax rate, and then they will mention that a lot of normal folks own stocks in your retirement accounts, for instance, to try to make you think that you as a normal person are going to have to pay this top rate on all of your retirement income. That sounds terrible. But the people on the radio who are saying this, of course, know that is not true. They know that's not true. But some of you out there that are listening might not know that that's not true, because you just get your news, like from the radio or something like that. And that's, that's not necessarily objectionable. That's fine. We get our news from various sources. But, I'm here on the radio too, so I wanted to kind of issue a correction to some stuff that I've been hearing. And so there are two numbers going around in particular. That's 44.6% on capital gains income and 25% on unrealized capital gains. So folks are giving you those numbers without the details, which frankly, I honestly think it is a little bit disrespectful. I've been kind of bombastic about it, but I do genuinely think it's disrespectful to not give you the details about it. And maybe you'd still disagree with the proposal if you actually knew what it did, right? Maybe you're like a super millionaire hedge fund manager out there listening to me right now. And so you still oh no, it's bad that I'm, super rich and I'm going to get taxed a little bit more. And that's fine, but you should at least know actually what's going on. So, let's first understand, I do think that most people understand that we have a progressive taxation system in the United States, at least ostensibly, that includes marginal tax brackets, right? So if you make $150,000 in labor income, that puts you in something like the 22% tax bracket. But you do not pay 22% on all of your income, right? When you're in the 22% tax bracket, only the income within that bracket is taxed at 22%, right? So if you make $150,000 a year, something like the first $40,000 is just straight up not taxed because of standard deductions and earned income tax credits and things like this, right? So something like between $30,000 and $50,000 for married couples is just straight up 0%, not taxed at all. And then you have like a 10% tax on the next $20,000 that you make, and then you have a 15% tax on the next $20,000, right? You get the gist. Like each of these segments of money that you get are taxed at different amounts, right? So with that understanding, I'm sure that you know where I'm going with this. The 44% number is the proposed top marginal tax rate. It is not a proposed tax rate on all capital gains income. It would only apply on annual capital gains income over $1 million.
Oh.
Right. So, look, if you don't reckon you're going to be bringing in more retirement income than $1 million a year, which I anticipate most of you will not be, right? This is not going to affect you. And even if you bring in retirement income of exactly $1 million a year, this is still not going to affect you. So, look, it's not really that actually crazy. Here is the current capital gains tax rate. And this is actually going to be important later. You actually also have a 0% capital gains tax rate on the first $47,000 you earn in capital gains income. As an individual. As an individual, if you're married, you have a 0% tax rate on the first almost $100,000 of capital gains income, which is not the case for labor income. It's only the first 30 to 50 is untaxed if you're married. But if you get income from profits, from the value that other people's labor creates, you get $100,000 of it free, no tax, if you're married and you're filing jointly. There's a 15% tax on income from $47,000 to a little over $500,000 for an individual, and then $100,000 to about $600,000 if you're married filing jointly, and then 20% tax rate on income over $500,000 if you're filing single, and then about $600,000 if you're filing individually, right? So currently the top marginal tax on capital gains income and remember, capital gains is just profit. It is just money that your money makes. It is not labor. It is not actually something that you have created value for. It's something that you are just getting because you have money. Which, that's like kind of bizarre. That the top tax rate, the most you could ever potentially spend in tax on any capital gains income is 20%. You also might notice something, that those tax rates are lower than labor income tax rates. That's exactly right. Here are the income tax brackets, what you have to pay if you actually work for a living. If you don't make money from the labor of others, here is what you have to pay in taxes to the federal government. Again, like I said, for the first like 0 to 30 to 50%, you're not, or $30 to $50,000, you're not taxed, which is again less than the 0% tax rate for capital gains income. And then for the first $10,000 after that amount, after you incorporate the standard deduction and earned income tax credits, it's 10%. The next $40,000 after that, so you're getting up to $90,000. So $40,000 between, $50,000 and $90,000 is taxed at 12%. The next $50,000 after that, so like $100,000 to $150,000, is 22%. The next $100,000 after that, so like $150,000 to $250,000, is taxed at 24%. 32% for the next $60,000 after that, and 35% for the next $300,000 after that, and then 37% on income over like $650,000 for labor income. That's if you're filing single, and obviously a little bit more if you're filing for married individuals filing, or for married filing jointly. So if you are a union machinist and you make $150,000 a year, you end up in the 22% tax bracket. Where if you made the exact same amount of money, but you did it from stocks, you did it from profit, you did it from the value that the labor of others creates, you only end up in the 15% tax bracket. If you are a union basketball player in the NBA and you end up making $1 million a year or something, which it is worth noting, that NBA careers are not going to be as long as other people's careers. So even if you make $1 million a year for a few years, ultimately the income potential from the NBA is not going to be as much as you might think. It's not like they're making $1 million a year by and large. Even the people that are making $1 million a year, sometimes they're not making $1 million a year for like 50 years, right? If you're a union basketball player in the NBA and you end up making $1 million a year, you get put in the highest income tax bracket, which is 37% on all of your income over something like $600,000. And that's, I think that's fine. And frankly, it should be higher, right? But if you get $1 million from stocks, you never pay more than 20% for any of your income. Never more than 20%. Which I think is BS. I think a basketball player sweating and working and training extremely hard, I do not think they should have to pay a higher tax rate than somebody who is making the exact same amount of money, but just sitting there on top of his piles of money, which is then making money for him, right? I think that's ludicrous. That is actually insane. That is insane. And the other is the tax on unrealized capital gains, the 25% tax on unrealized capital gains. But of course, obviously, again, they don't tell you the caveats. From Axios, this 25% on unrealized capital gains applies only to individuals with at least $100 million in wealth.
Oh.
And even then, it's people who have at least $100 million in wealth who do not pay at least 25% tax rate on their income, inclusive of unrealized capital gains. Right? So even if you have a wealth of $100 million, you do not even necessarily qualify for the 25% tax on unrealized capital gains. So within that $100 million club, you would only pay taxes on unrealized capital gains if at least 80% of your wealth is in tradable assets, which is not shares of private startups or real estate. And then another caveat for this illiquid group is that there would be a deferred tax of up to 10% on unrealized capital gains upon exit. Right? So again, an even more exclusive, rarefied air. I mean, are you even, as just a working person in Huntsville, Alabama, will you ever even meet a person with $100 million in wealth? I don't even know if I have been in the same room with somebody who has $100 million in wealth. I cannot think of a room that I have been in that has included somebody with $100 million. And so the idea that people are going on the radio and talking about this and talking about how, it's so sad. It's so sad that these people that have ungodly amounts of wealth are going to have to pay 25%, some of them, on the profit that their wealth makes them. Not 25% on their wealth. If you have $100 million, you don't have to pay $25 million. You only have to pay 25% on whatever money that $100 million that you have makes you. I mean, it's just so I cannot imagine caring about this. It's so bizarre to me. And then why do this, right? Why do this? Because the argument about the unrealized capital gains is that, look, they haven't realized their capital gains. If I have, $1 million in stocks and the value of those stocks increases to $2 million, it's not like it's in the bank, right? I have not used it. I have not realized the income from my capital gains. And the reason that you should tax unrealized capital gains in the top kind of stratosphere of this stuff is because when a billionaire's wealth or a multi-hundred millionaire's wealth goes up by a large amount of money, it is still income, even if it's not cash in a bank account. And that's what the White House argues for this policy. And it's obviously true. What they do is they borrow against their asset and use those loans as disposable income. And they get those loans for lower interest rates than other people and all of this kind of stuff. So they are able to leverage the unrealized capital gains for income. That is an income stream that is untaxed, that you and I do not get, that the ultra wealthy do. And so, yes, when you have an income stream, even if it's not cash in your bank account or it's not coming in the same way that it does for normal people, you should be taxed on it, right? You should not just get a freebie because you figured out a loophole. Why should you? Why should you? So there you go, right? Now, look. Now you actually know what's going on with these tax plans that are being proposed by Kamala Harris, the Communist Law Harris. I don't know. And, look, maybe if you're a millionaire hedge fund manager, you still oppose the plans, even knowing what they are. And, that makes sense, right? That makes sense. But if you're not a millionaire hedge fund manager, then maybe now you have a little bit of a different opinion than you did before. I hope you do. But that brings me to the clip, okay? So one of the folks that are doing these things that I've been describing is a local radio host, Michael Yaffe. And the other day, he tweeted on the tweeter asking, quote, why do Democrats really push to dramatically raise capital gains taxes? Okay, and I think I've laid out the case pretty well for why you should do that. And so I answered him on Twitter. And when I answered him, I was like, God, I hope he talks about this on the radio so I can react to it on Saturday. I really hope he does. Because I could not, I was like, what is he even going to say? What is he even going to say? How is he going to justify super rich people paying less money in taxes than normal working people do for actually working? I don't know. How's he going to justify this? How's he going to justify it? So by God, he did respond to it. He did talk about it on the radio. And so let's take a listen to how he responds to my answer for why I, at least, look, I can't speak for Democrats, but I want to dramatically raise capital gains taxes, even though, I'm not a Democrat whisperer or whatever. But let's listen to this. It's fantastic. Are you hearing that, Adam? I'm not hearing that.
I am not. Let's try this again.
So I was thinking about this yesterday, and I'm like, okay, why are they doing this? Why do Democrats want to do this?
Oh, no. That's
now,
not
part of it might be because Kamala Harris saying...
No, that's the first one, the taxi. I called it Yaffy Taxi.
Yeah, I got you. It's not playing.
It's not playing? Oh, no! Man. And I set that up so well.
You did. You set it up great.
Jeez.
Let's try one more time. Nope. Sorry, bro.
Oh, man.
That gets me back.
Oh. It may be here. It's here.
To what some other people were saying.
All right, here we go.
So dumb.
Okay, let's start it over. So here's what he says. So you hear what he says about it.
That gets me back to what some other people were saying. Gosh, people are so dumb. Jacob Morrison of the Valley Labor Report responded to this as well.
I did.
Said this. Let me see. As a worker, someone who makes his living from my labor rather than the labor of others.
That's right.
I reckon folks who make their money from the labor of others should have to at least pay as much taxes on their earnings as folks who work for a living.
That's right.
Guess that makes me a communist. IDK.
Yep. It all sounds good so far.
Does he know that the bottom 50% of wealth earners in this country basically pay zero federal income taxes?
Pause it! Does Yaffy not know that the first 50,000 that you get more money for free for no income tax on capital gains if it's not labor income? Remember, I just told you, if you're married filing jointly, right? The standard deductions and the earned income tax credits and all of this, it's like $30,000 to $50,000. I don't know. I'm not like a tax expert, okay? I don't know exactly what it is, but it's like the first $30,000 to $50,000 of income if you're married filing jointly is untaxed, right? It's untaxed. If you're married filing jointly, the first $100,000 in capital gains is untaxed. Double the amount of money if you make it from the labor of others, from work that other people do. If you collect profits, if you collect rents, the first $100,000 of that is tax-free. Double the amount of tax-free income that you get if you work for it. If you actually work for it. That's crazy. That's crazy. Does he not know that? Surely he does. I don't know. Let's continue.
So what are you talking about? There are a lot of laborers in this country that effectively pay zero income taxes.
Yeah, pause it. Yeah, there are a lot of like petty small business tyrants, right? That pay $0 in capital income taxes. Okay? So, same basically. Except they get it better. If you don't have to work for your money, you have a better tax structure. Okay, let's continue.
So what are you talking about?
That's what I'm talking about.
But this idea that if you're a laborer, this helps you. How?
Okay, here's how it helps me. It helps me in a few ways. Number one, it's BS. It is BS that somebody who makes a living off of profit would pay less than I do on the same income when I work for a living. When you work for a living. You go in, you clock out, you do work, you sweat, you cry, you bleed. You have to pay more money in taxes on the same income if you do that than if you just sat on a big pile of money and that big pile of money made money for you. That's crazy. That's crazy. Number two, the less economic power that is concentrated in the hands of a few, the better and the more democratic our society, right? So, even aside from just the revenue collection, yes, we should just be, Kamala Harris is not going to do this, unfortunately, but we should just take money from these people. They should not have so much money because in a capitalist society, money is power. Money is economic power. Economic power is social power. So if you got hundreds of millions, if you have billions of dollars, then you control society in a way that other people do not. And we should just not allow that. We should just not allow that. That's crazy. And then number 3, I get to hear rich people and their defenders on the radio cry about it. And that's, I mean, really, that's kind of priceless, I think. I think that's kind of priceless. So let's continue.
If the government bails you out, that's the only way. If government starts paying your way instead of an economy growing, maybe that's how it does it. Which is what they want. But they care more about fairness, quote unquote fairness, how it feels, the perception of fairness rather than actual reality of economics. And how to grow an economy, grow jobs, grow prosperity for people, all people.
There you go. Love to be, told about Economics 101 by somebody who apparently does not know that you get the first $100,000 of capital gains income tax-free if you're married filing jointly. That's great. I love it. It's fun. Okay, so there you go. Frankly, I think kind of an embarrassing thing for Yaffe to do, to argue about that people who make money from profits should be able to pay less in taxes than he does for his labor. People think, radio hosts, that's not a hard job at all. You just have to kind of yell on the radio. And, look, if you do it well, it would be a job. It would be a job. You would have to put in labor. It would be an effort, and he does 2 radio shows a day now. So he's like on the air, I think, for something like 4 hours. He's talking for like 4 or 5 hours a day, 5 days a week. And then presumably you would think that he has to do some kind of, I don't follow Yaffe around, right? So I don't know kind of what his prep plan is, right? But I mean, preparing 4 hours of content every single day that would be a lot of work, right? And that's how he gets his money, from his labor. And, he thinks, apparently, that somebody who makes money from profits should pay less in taxes than he does for his labor. I think that's kind of embarrassing, personally. I did want to share one more clip with y'all before we wrap this segment up, though, because it was pretty funny. And so this clip here is Yaffe explaining why he thinks that this is in Kamala Harris's plan.
So I was thinking about this yesterday, and I'm like, okay, why are they doing this?
Tell us.
Why do Democrats want to do this?
Tell us.
Now, part of it might be because Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are basically Marxists at this point.
Basically Marxist. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Kamala Harris, famously Marxist in her political program. Yeah.
I wish Yaffe could tell me about Marxism. Tell me more, Yaffe.
Oh my God, that would be so cool. You know
Tell
how
me
we
about
do
the labor theory of value.
Yeah.
What are the
God.
means of production?
You know how we do our Unions 101 segments every now and then. He should give us. Oh my God.
He should do a Marxism 101. Yeah.
Oh,
cite it, chapter and verse. Tell me where in the manifesto. Tell me. I want to know. He's got the dibs on that.
What's the over and under that he's read Capital?
How many books has he read? I'm just going to go there. I mean, when's the last book he read?
I think I'm going to be a Yaffe defender. I think Yaffe reads books. Come on, Adam.
Okay.
I'm sure he reads books.
That's true. I mean, Bill O'Reilly put out books, so,
Exactly.
Rush Limbaugh put out books.
Exactly.
I mean,
he's got to at least be reading those. I mean, come on.
I mean, got to get your talking points somehow.
But I would doubt
fascinating.
that he's read Capital. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say probably Yaffe has not read Capital.
We could do a true or false, like a game, and do quotes. Is this a Marx quote or a Jesus quote?
Oh, or a Marx quote or a Ronald Reagan quote.
Oh, that's good. That's fun.
That would be a good one. I love that boomer meme that always goes around of like Ronald Reagan saying, any attempt to disarm the working class must be frustrated by force if necessary. That's my favorite Ronald Reagan quote meme that ever goes around because it's actually a Karl Marx quote. But nobody knows anything, so people just share it all the time. So there you go. Okay, I spent too long on that. I apologize. Do we have Mustafa in the Zoom?
We do have Mustafa in the Zoom.
Let's bring Mustafa on. Mustafa Hassan is the local president for the CWA here, local 3905 in Huntsville, striking AT&T worker, like I said, president of the Communications Workers of America, local 3905, right here in Huntsville, Alabama. Brother, thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. Great to have you back. Love talking to folks here locally about the work that they're doing. So before we talk about the strike, and that's obviously going to be the subject of the interview, can you tell us more about what do your members do for AT&T?
Well, the members that are actually involved in the strike it's mainly our outside people, our service techs, our facility techs, our digital techs. They kind of keep up the system for AT&T. We also have call center workers, wire techs. They come out and do internet and phone, things of that nature. Linemen, construction, all those guys basically work on the system here in Huntsville and the rest of northern Alabama. Gotcha. Your call center workers are on strike too, right? That is correct. We have a call center on Clinton Avenue in Huntsville, and they take collection calls. They are also in that contract. They are part of the strike as well. Okay. Great. Yeah, and I'm sure that folks in the listening area, presumably, if you've seen any picket line, it's probably the one on Clinton. That was the first picket line I ever walked on, the Clinton Avenue picket line during the 2019 AT&T strike. Yeah. And 2019 is an important year to just kind of lock away in your head and remember, folks that are listening, because 2019 is the last time that these folks renegotiated their contract with AT&T. And so that came before COVID and all of this inflation. And so while so many other unions have been renegotiating contract, even people not in unions, people getting pay raises, pay bumps, and things like this during 2020, 2021, 22, 23. Folks at AT&T, organized with CWA, have not, right? And so they're looking for, rightfully so, really big, particularly wage increases in this strike. But before even getting to the wage increases, the company has not been bargaining in good faith. And Mustafa, my understanding is that's why y'all have gone on strike. It's not an economic strike. It's an unfair labor practices strike. So explain to folks why you went on strike and what the ULPs are. Absolutely. So ULP is an unfair labor practice. We have been negotiating with the company since actually late June. The actual contract did not expire until August the 4th. And throughout that time frame, we hadn't really gotten enough progress or traction, which we would say where we would feel like the company was bargaining in good faith. One of the ULPs is we felt like the company was engaging in what's called surface bargaining, where they're just kind of going through the motions, passing proposals, and not really meaning anything by it, or there's really nothing behind those things. The big one, which also occurred in 2019, was the company didn't have a decision maker at the bargaining table. Meaning, if there was a proposal passed by the company, if our bargaining team questioned, okay, can you give us some details about your proposal? That person at the table who passed that proposal couldn't even explain it. And then they would have to reconvene and start over. So we feel that we've been real patient with them. And it just got to the point where even at August the 4th, we worked without a contract until August 16th. And that stuff has continued to happen. So we decided to file unfair labor practices against AT&T. Gotcha. And that's important for folks to understand that, labor law in this country, as anemic as it is, it does, and labor law does not require AT&T or any other employer to give the union or the workers any particular contract, but it does mandate that they bargain in good faith. And one aspect of bargaining in good faith is having decision makers at the table. It is not bargaining in good faith if the person across from you is not somebody that can actually make a call on any given proposal, right? And that's one of the things that you are alleging AT&T was doing. And another important thing to understand about ULP strikes is that they are more protected than economic strikes. So the company cannot
permanently replace these workers while they're on the ULP strike, and they would have the opportunity to do that if it was just a straight economic strike. So there's some good protections there. Brother, how have your members been reacting to the strike? I'm interested in how they've been feeling. They've been on strike for something like 8 days, is it? Or has it been 2 weeks?
Yeah, a week, 8 days as of today. We started on the 16th. We're very well, actually. I think the strike has brought the membership together. Everybody's out there. We have almost full participation. Spirits are high. They're very active during the strike. Everyone's leaning on everyone for support. We've even had more members decide to join us that weren't members before.
Oh, wow.
Morale is high. They're very attentive to what's going on in the negotiations. Everybody wants to know what's happening at the table. Everybody's got input. Everybody's just been really stepping up. So I'm definitely proud of our local as a whole. And we look forward to this continuing.
You said you've had very high participation and actually had some people join the union that hadn't before. Do you have a percentage that you could give us on, the number of folks that are holding the line, or the percentage of folks that are holding the line?
Yeah, it's over 99%. It's less than 1% that's not on strike. We may have a few members that are not on the picket line, a very few. However, they're not working. So which is important.
They're still striking.
Exactly. We don't consider them as a scab. So it's well over 99%.
That's awesome.
Yep.
How do you do that in Alabama? In Alabama, in the Right to Work South, where people don't even you mentioned people joining the union. People don't even have to be a member of the union where you represent them, much less have to go out on strike. When nobody has to go out on strike when a union calls a strike. It's all people decide whether or not they want to cross a picket line. And so being able to have 99% participation, 99% of people holding the line here in Huntsville, Alabama, I think that a lot of people would kind of be surprised at that. So how is it that your union has been able to maintain that level of solidarity and participation in this action?
We're a tight-knit group. A lot of our members have been through this in 2019. They know that it was beneficial as a result. The ULP did not, I think it was like 3-4 days at that time it lasted. The company decided to get somebody at the table. They know the bigger picture. We had been anticipating that this may be a difficult round of negotiations because, as you mentioned earlier, the last contract was in 2019, and a lot of things have changed in the world since then. Right. So we were kind of preparing for that. Even like I said, I mentioned some of our non-members. They won't cross the picket line either. I don't know any non-members that have crossed the picket line, which says a lot. Yeah. And we've united, real good. So that's a big thing. So in Alabama, that does make a big statement. We have a lot of veteran members. We have some younger members as well. And a lot of our veteran members have stood up and kind of taken those guys under their wing and made sure that they have what they need and they know what's going on. And I think a lot of people see the long-term benefit of us striking and what this means for contracts in the future.
Speaking of, contracts in the future and talking about what you've gotten in the past, I was talking to one brother on the picket line when I was out there last week, Daniel, I'm sure you know him. And he was talking about, kind of the slow degradation of the job quality and the pay and the benefits. He said that he remembers, when he started at AT&T, I don't know how many years ago it was, 20 years or something like that, that there was the progression was 4 or 5 years. And he remembers people telling him, look, if you don't want to do this as a career, you need to get out in year 1 or year 2. Because if you get to year 3, year 4, you're going to get addicted to the money and you're never going to go anywhere else, right? You need to get out soon if you don't want to do this for the rest of your life, because you'll get addicted to the money because the money's so good. And that's, and he talked about how that's not the case anymore, how the turnover is higher, you don't keep, the retention is lower. And so can you give us just some details about the, how things have changed over the years and why you think that is.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that. Even at some point, I think there was a statement made by AT&T that these are no longer looked at as career jobs, right? And something along the lines of the contract being outdated and that a lot of our members make too much money as it is. So I think the focus of the company has shifted. And you can kind of see that through just some of the things that have been going on and some of the things they've been trying to change within the contract and some of the practices that the company has done. So I think that's where you would kind of see a lot of that shift. So he's absolutely right. So it's just a different dynamic. The world is different. A lot of good union or labor jobs, they're not what they used to be. So one of the things we've kind of done is we've kind of tried to pass that torch to some of our younger people, get them acclimated and letting them know the importance of the union and the importance, the reason why they're able to get these benefits is because of what was done in the past with this contract. So this contract that we're in negotiations with, this contract has been over years and years in the making. So there's so many layers to it. And overall, it may be one of the better contracts in the nation as far as CWA and AT&T. There's some things that we would like to change, but there's a lot of things that the company would like to change as well.
How has the public reacted to the strike? How's the reception been in Huntsville? And if you have any, broader testimonies from places elsewhere?
Oh, yeah. We've gotten a lot of support from the community at large. Several people have come walk the picket lines with us who've been here in the past. A lot of people have come and donated their time. They've walked the pickets. They've given us food, drinks, things of that nature. Our signs say honk if you support labor or honk if you support workers. Everybody is honking as they go by. So we have 8 different locations throughout North Alabama that we're at and we're picketing. In every single one, we've got overwhelming support. When I say overwhelming, you get a few people that drive by, but people are honking the horn, waving to us. Other unions have stepped up and helped us out. I actually got a text this morning that somebody's going to be out on the picket lines and giving out sandwiches and drinks and, helping us out. We've gotten help in the political arena, just overwhelming support in the local community as well as in our district. And just to kind of add on to that, this strike is bigger than just the Huntsville area, of course. This is throughout 9 states, the entire Southeast, and there's over 17,000 workers that are in this strike.
Right. That's exactly right. You mentioned the political support. Would you care to elaborate on that? What kind of stuff in Huntsville in particular have we seen?
Yeah, Daniels came out yesterday and walked the line at 308 Clinton, and he's walked the line with us in the past. A lot of state reps have pledged to write letters in support of us for the strike. When I was in Washington, D.C., earlier this year, we got a lot of reps that decided, hey, we would write letters for you guys in support. Not everybody. I don't want to name everybody, but we've had a lot of political support as well.
That's great. And what about any updates since the strike has began? Have negotiations moved forward at all that you can tell, or what's been going on at the time?
It's moved. I don't know if it's moved at the pace that we would like, of course. However, there was a mediator that's been brought in to try to help move things along so we could at least get past this ULP stage. And that's kind of that kind of started a couple of days ago. We're like 2-3 days in. The mediator had to get acclimated and get up to speed to where we were in the negotiations. So their job is to kind of help bridge the gap or the divide that we have right now. So it's kind of a slow roll right now. We're hoping that it gains some steam, especially next week. Like I said, this was the first week and we just wrapped up this first week. So we're not that much closer, but it seems like we're headed in the right direction. So I am optimistic about that.
Great. That's good to hear. How can people support if they want to support? What's the ask of the community?
We will, any support that you're willing to give. If you want to come out and walk the lines with us, feel free to do that. We need support, financial support, as well as things like water, snacks, food, tents, just getting the word out. Anything that somebody is willing to help us out, we're willing to receive that. So you can reach out to my personal email is president@cwa3905.org. You can reach out that way, or you can reach out to our secretary. Her email is secretary@cwa3905.org as well.
Great. Mustafa Hassan, president of CWA Local 3905 in Huntsville, North Alabama. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it, and we'll see you out on the picket line.
Thanks again, Jacob. Appreciate you.
All right, folks, that was Mustafa Hassan. You heard him. Hang out with folks on the picket line. Get with them. Donate if you can. If you're in a local union, make a motion for your union to donate to their strike fund. The North Alabama Area Labor Council passed a motion to donate $500 to their picket line support. So I need to get that check to Mustafa here in the next couple of days. Brother. So I owe him money, so I got to get that to him. But yeah, help him out, folks, if you can. We're going to head to a break really quick, and I think we have that letter carrier in the Zoom now. So we're going to take a break, and we're going to be right back to talk to Jake Edel about the situation with the rural carriers. So stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and neighbors are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough to keep their jobs. We need to fix this. Let's close the health care coverage gap. To learn more, visit coveralabama.org.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Iron Workers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs, from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Iron Workers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
The Laborers International Union of North America, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact Donna at their training center to start the process. That phone number is 256-415-7452. Again, that phone number is 256-415-7452. No experience is needed. Free training is offered, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is their mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger food drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit nalc.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only union talk radio show. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host Adam Keller. If you've got anything to add, give us a call. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. I think what we're going to do, we've run a little bit long on some of our other segments. I think we're going to kick Last Week in Southern Labor and Boss Watch both to overtime if we're able to get to them at all. But that's all the more reason for you to subscribe to the newsletter at tvlr.fm/contact. Send us a note that you want to subscribe to those newsletters so that you can get Boss Watch and Last Week in Southern Labor in your inbox, in your email inbox every single week on Monday and Tuesday. Some really good information in there, and some really cool stuff happened last week in Southern Labor, so you don't want to miss it. We have on the line now Jake, not me, a different Jake, who's a rural carrier from Texas, Alamo 001. He is running for the executive committee of the National Rural Letter Carriers Association, NRLCA. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Sorry about the delay.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Glad to have you. Appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. You are... I wanted to start the interview with just to kind of help people understand, get in the frame of mind of the rural carriers, specifically as it relates to their compensation, because you do not get paid in the same way that a city carrier does, or really most employees, because most employees get paid hourly, but that is not the case for rural mail carriers. Can you explain kind of the general method of compensation for y'all?
So we have what's called the Rural Route Evaluated Compensation System. It is a system where essentially they count every piece of mail, every parcel, every mile that you have on your route. They put it into a formula, and it spits out that it should take, so many hours per week, and that's how they basically pay you. So they say if it takes you 42 hours a week to do your route, they'll pay you the 40 hours plus 2 hours overtime in your salary. So you get the same paycheck every week, but if you go over that time, you don't get any extra compensation. But if you stay under that time, you basically win on that.
And so that would frustrate me a lot, I know. I'm sure there's a lot of frustration among the rural carriers about that, or at least, in particular now, as, rural carriers have been talking about a degradation in the pay system and increased complexity, a lack of transparency. Can you talk a little bit about how this method of payment has been used and kind of degraded over the years to make the job less attractive than it used to be?
So back in 2012, the union went to arbitration with the post office, and out of that came the new system that we have. The old system that we had was rather easy to understand, about 20 standards. You could do the math yourself, put it into Excel spreadsheet, and figure out your own evaluation if you wanted to on a day-by-day basis. Now it's gone from that from the engineering support to about 100 standards. Although they're very specific, a lot of the numbers we lost on, some of the numbers we gained, but it's very confusing to a lot of carriers, especially those who are used to the old system that, you could figure it out on your own. Now you have to ask for reports, and you have to basically tally up yourself and try to figure it out. And it's just extremely convoluted to the point where many carriers are starting to leave the union. They're pulling their dues. They're retiring early. They're very frustrated at the system and how complicated it is and how difficult it is to understand.
Right. I would be frustrated about that. One of the things that you told me the other day is that, previously there had been 20 categories within this evaluation system that could determine how you get paid. And now there are 100. There are 100 of these categories that determine how you get paid. And people don't know going in, you go in and you pick up your mail and you don't know how much you're going to get paid for that day's work at the beginning of the day.
You do, because it goes to the route. So the previous counts that we used to have with those those original 20 standards was only a 2-week manual count. Now it's digital, and they keep track of it throughout the past year, and they average that throughout the year. So every day I'm going to get paid for what my route is evaluated at for the past year when it comes to the mini mail surveys, which are done twice a year right now. A lot of carriers are going to try to pushing that back to just once a year, like we used to do with the manual counts. So that way, what you're going to get paid for salary wise for the year, rather than, having it update every 6 months with these mini mail surveys that we're currently in right now.
I see. Gotcha. And so, your contract, y'all, like the city carriers, have been working under an expired contract, although for less time than the city carriers. Your contract is now 3 months expired. What can you tell us about the state of the negotiations with the Postal Service?
Last update we got was a video update from our union president on contract negotiations, and he basically said that we put forward our proposals. We're still in negotiations. One of the things that he would like to see is the elimination of the 2-tier pay scale, because we have 2 tables right now. But as of right now, we don't know. We haven't been told which proposals they're putting forward, which resolutions that we passed in national conventions are being put forward. It's been very kind of hush-hush and kind of quiet about it. I mean, I understand that they do sign those non-disclosure type agreements when it comes to proposing or to contract negotiations, but a lot of us are getting kind of frustrated with that. You saw it with the city carriers where they were asking for open contract negotiations. I think the rural carriers want that as well.
Right. That was a really exciting thing to see pass at the City Carriers Convention, the open bargaining resolution, and so that's something that you would be interested in seeing. It sounds like at next week's convention, because as of right now, what you're saying is that you don't know what the union's proposals are in these contract negotiations, and you don't know what the agency's proposals are.
Exactly. We have no transparency. We don't know if we're asking for how large of a pay increase for RCAs, especially, which are the substitute carriers. It's very difficult to go ahead and recruit them because the pay is only $20.38 an hour. Plus, a lot of them have to provide their own vehicle. So we're having a lot of trouble with retention with RCAs. And then you also have the regular carriers who a lot of us that are on table 2 make. I know for me, if I was hired 5 years earlier, I'd be making $14,000 more now than I am.
Yeah, wow, that's pretty significant. Has your union made any statements about why they're not sharing any of these proposals?
Other than that, they just sign agreements not to discuss outside, or let them know what's going on, or not let them know what's not going on, but basically what's being proposed.
And so, speaking of the convention that's slated to happen next week, and you mentioned an affinity for the open bargaining resolutions that were passed at the City Carriers Convention. Are there open bargaining resolutions slated to be discussed at the Rural Carriers Convention, or do you have somebody, are folks lined up planning to introduce a resolution to that effect? What's the status?
When we go to state conventions, that's where we basically propose our resolutions that we want to take to national convention. So each state brings up their own, and then once we get to national convention, actually a few days before, there's a resolutions committee that will go over all the resolutions, see which ones are duplicates, which ones are pretty much exactly the same or kind of worded a little differently, but basically say the same thing. And then those get proposed to the actual national delegation.
And so, do you know of any, if any state associations have submitted open bargaining resolutions?
I don't know yet. I haven't heard of anyone else's state. I know it wasn't passed at Texas. Nobody proposed it there. There were term limits proposed. Those were rejected. But other than that, nothing yet.
Can you propose resolutions from the floor?
Yes, you can. You can actually suspend the rules and go ahead and try to do that. It just takes a while takes a lot to try to get something like that from the floor.
And it doesn't sound like there's any kind of organized activity around trying to make that happen?
Not yet, at
Not
least.
yet.
We can certainly, build the fever around it, get more communication out there. It's very difficult to have that central unit of communication with the entire craft, other than a couple of Facebook pages where it's kind of lawless out there about what should be proposed, and a lot of people actually don't even understand how the delegation system works. With the city carriers, they get to vote on a ticket, and they get ballots for every member. With the rural letter carriers, we actually have a delegation that goes to national convention, and that's how we vote on president, vice president, and so forth.
Right. And so one of the things that will be happening at the convention is the elections. The rural carriers elect their officers at the conventions. It's not a one-member, one-vote kind of situation. And you mentioned that you are running for the executive committee. There are a number of contested elections that are expected at the convention. Can you talk to us about the different, the competing parties and kind of what the platforms of each are?
Basically, you have the slate of those that have been doing union work and doing the executive committee and doing all the board stuff for sometimes almost 2 decades, and they haven't touched a route in years. And a lot of the carriers that are running against them have been delivering mail. In fact, in the past 2 years, those that have experienced this new pay compensation system, how much how convoluted it is, how frustrating it is. Many of us carriers, myself included, lost $1,000 a month when the new evaluations came out from the old system to the new system. So there's a lot of frustrated carriers out there that we're trying to represent. We're trying to be the voice for them. And while the board may know, of the situations, they haven't experienced the situations, and that's where we're trying to bring in.
Right. And what are some of the platforms that, what are some of the key proposals that you and some of the other folks that you're running with have were you to get in office?
For me, it's communication, transparency, education, and just being honest. There's a lot of times where, we're just sitting here in the dark. We're trying to figure things out on our own. We're, getting with each other at union meetings or online, trying to explain like, hey, here's my experience with the system. Because right now it's still we still have a lot of people that are the old school way, where like, hey, here's the 99-page guide, go ahead and just read it. That's not how a lot of millennials work. It's not certainly not how a lot of Gen Z works. And if we want to reach them and have them join the union, we need to start going to video format, short video format, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. A lot of these kids are growing up on this and we haven't embraced it. If we're not going to adapt, we're going to start dying off. And I want to keep this union. I want my son to be able to do this if he so chooses. I think he would be great at this job. We got to think about the future of the craft, not just what has been.
Right, exactly. Just what would you think that the response from the other side would be? The folks that you're running against. What do you think that if you had to kind of put yourself in their shoes, what would they say is their kind of pitch for staying in office and voting for them instead?
That we're in the middle of contract negotiations. Doing something drastic would put that at jeopardy. It would delay us even further. We're making gains in negotiations. They'll probably try to use that as an excuse, but at this point, we're at a breaking point. You have so many that are leaving. I know at least the Texas delegation, we went from 96 delegates last year to 92 this year, which means we lost 400 members in the craft, just in Texas alone, which is one of the fastest growing states.
Wow. Where can folks learn more about your group that's running, or anything else around the stuff happening within the Rural Carriers Union and at the convention next week?
There will probably be some updates in the Discord of a podcast that tries to help carriers. That one's called United We Scan. We go over a lot of issues that have been coming up. We try to get information out there for other carriers to go ahead and know, like, hey, here's what's going on with mapping. Here's what's going on with this that we've heard of. And usually the union's actually behind by about 2 to 3 days. Whenever we announce something, and all of a sudden they'll post about it. So we're really trying to get that information out to other carriers to let them know, hey, here's what's going on. Here's what we're experiencing. Let us know if you're doing the same, if it's happening to you too. They'll do a chat in the Discord type deals. So if you want, hop on that podcast and try to get the link for the Discord.
All right. Jake, is there anything else that you think folks ought to know about before we let you go?
Just that most of us rural carriers, we love our job. We're the ragtag group. We're not the ones that you see with the uniforms on and the usual postal vehicle, the LLV. We're usually out in our own vehicle with a strobe light on the top and a tire cover that says mail delivery. But we love our job. We like just to be driving around, just wave, say hi. It's a great job, but we definitely need a little bit more protection.
Gotcha. All right, Jake, appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us today.
Not a problem. I appreciate you. Have a good one.
Yep, you too. All right, folks, we're going to be wrapping up here in the first half of the program, but like we have a second half of the program that we call Overtime. It's going to be at least another hour and a half, although we may go a little bit long this weekend. But you can find us on Facebook and YouTube to continue watching the program. We have lined up, we have Stephen Silva lined up to talk to about his book, The UAW's Southern Gamble. It is a really comprehensive history of like the last 35 years of the UAW, from the 1980s to the 2020s, right as Shawn Fain came into office is kind of where the book stopped. So it is, genuinely very comprehensive book, and really excited to talk to him about, what the UAW has been doing in the last 30 years to try to organize in particular Southern non-union automotive manufacturers, why some of it has worked and why most of it has not. And then what contrast he sees, if any, during the Shawn Fain years. Really excited for that conversation. It's going to be great. We're also going to be reacting to Tim Pool. He has some thoughts about unions and some other UAW updates. So make sure you find us on Facebook and YouTube. Adam, take us out with the plugs.
All right, real quick, go to labornotes.org/events. They have some great trainings coming up, and you want to check those out, including Tuesday. They have one for rank and file educators. Speaking of Labor Notes, registration is live for the Alabama Troublemaker School on Saturday, October 19th in Birmingham. You don't want to miss this. Again, go to labornotes.org/events. On Thursday, September 5th, I'll be hosting a listening session for Alabama Rise at the Unitarian Universalist Church in Huntsville from 6 p.m. to 7:15. If you want to come on out, talk about state policy, and just connect with some like-minded folks. Don't forget to vote if you are in District 1 or District 5, Huntsville, city limits, on Tuesday, August 27th. Polls will be open from 7 to 7. Check out the North Alabama Area Labor Council's Facebook page for more information, and feel free to reach out to me or Jacob. If you're a union member and you want to get some more background about that election, we're happy to help you.
Yeah, the North Alabama Labor Council did a lot of work engaging with the candidates, so we got some good information on the Facebook page that you can read. North Alabama Area Labor Council on Facebook. All right, folks, that's going to be it for us. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. Okay, we're off the radio now. Appreciate everybody tuning in, staying tuned. Like I said, we got a great overtime lined up for you. Don't go anywhere. We're going to take a really quick break and be right back.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host Adam Keller. Appreciate everybody tuning in, staying tuned for Overtime, the second half of the program, which is primarily online, but now plays on the radio in Whitesburg, Kentucky. Thank you to WMMT 88.7 FM, something else, AM. In Whitesburg. Appreciate them for running this half of the show as well. Folks, I feel like I was sick about 2 weeks ago with COVID, and so I don't know if you get like a, when you're on chemo and then you get off chemo immediately after chemo, you get something like they call a chemo high, like where you felt so bad for so long, now you feel great. I have got something going on like that with COVID. I think it was terrible. It was the worst that I felt in a long time, but now I feel good, and I wish I had had time to do more prep, because there's so much that happened in the last 2 weeks, including the DNC, and we're not going to be able to talk very much about that because I didn't watch just a whole lot of it. There's some of the speeches that I saw, some were good, some were not. Yeah, lots of stuff going on. Wish I'd had more time to prep so we could talk about more of it, but we still have plenty to talk about. We have a great Adam Conover clip from a Animation Guild rally that we're going to play. We're going to start with that, I think. And then we're going to be talking to, like I said, Stephen J. Silva, who is a professor at American University's School of International Service and an affiliate professor in American University's Economics Department. He teaches international economics, international trade relations, and comparative politics. He has a really good book about the UAW's Southern Gamble, their attempt to organize the Southern non-union automotive manufacturing industry over the last 35 years. Very, very good book. Recommend folks reading it if you have an interest in this kind of stuff. We're also going to be reacting to some Tim Pool clips. That's a pretty jarring kind of contrast there. Have a really serious conversation with a professor and then going to be reacting to a dumbass who doesn't know anything. But then we got some other UAW updates. There's some stuff going on about Stellantis and Belvedere. And folks, we'll take your calls. 844-899-TVLR. Had this guy just tweet at me on the show's account and complaining about that income tax segment that we just did. Well, call in, talk to us. 844-899-TVLR. Tell me why I'm wrong. I would love to be enlightened. I don't like to be wrong. I don't like to be incorrect about things. So I would love to know what I'm saying wrong. Correct me. Call in 844-899-TVLR. 844-899-8857. All right, so we talked last week. We had pre-taped an interview with a representative of the Animation Guild, who are currently in negotiations with AMPTP, which is the big
Hollywood studios.
Yeah, the union of Hollywood studios, so we talked about their negotiations, some of the things that they're pushing for, particularly there's a big focus on AI. They held a rally last week, and Adam Conover spoke at it, and there was a clip of him going around on TikTok and Twitter that was, holy crap, that was really, really good. I don't know if he's ever going to get another acting job in Hollywood because of how active and out front he has been on the union stuff, but I mean, if he wants to, I think he could go really far in the union world, leadership of the Writers Guild or the Screen Actors Guild, and then maybe even parlaying that into some bigger office in the AFL-CIO potentially. I mean, he's really, really been doing some good work here. And so I wanted to play this clip for you. I'm just going to play it for you in full. It is, just really, really cool, talking about respect from the bosses and, how important, or maybe not how important it is. Let's take a listen.
There's something that I want to hear you never say again, because something that workers in this town say all too often is we say, you know what, they don't respect us. They don't respect what we do. They don't respect animation. They don't respect writing. They don't respect whatever your craft is, right? And that's why they won't give us what we deserve. And the next time you hear someone say that, I want you to tell them that is exactly what the companies want you to say. They want you to believe that their respect fucking matters. It does not. You do not need their respect because they will never give it to you. I sat across the table from Carol Lombardini and all of those lawyers. I saw how they look at us. They belittle, they attack, they denigrate, and they do that strategically because they know if they can make you believe that you do not deserve better, then they win. But the fact is, it is a lie. Your work makes these people hundreds of millions of dollars. No one else's. Your work. They need you. Their respect. They need you. Their respect doesn't matter. What matters is your respect for yourself. And if you respect yourself enough to say, you know what, I will not work for you until I get what I deserve, then you will fucking win.
That's pretty cool. That's awesome. So I think a lot of people could stand to take that to heart in their contract negotiations with their employer. The respect the employer has for you is not super important. It's a nice to have. It's nice to have that kind of human to human respect. But if they don't give it to you, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You just have to have respect for yourself and your fellow workers. So that was really cool to see. And really cool to see that kind of cooperation across crafts, right? Adam is in the Writers Guild and the Screen Actors Guild, but this was not a Writers Guild or Screen Actors Guild rally. This was a rally for the Animation Guild. And so, there are a lot of people that have this, this kind of idea of, my union should only be looking out for our members' interests, for my interests. And that's just not the way that unions should be operating, and that's not the way that Adam is operating. And so that's something that I really appreciate. And hope that we continue to see more out of him and more of that mindset about the importance of solidarity and supporting other people in other crafts, particularly in our industry, because particularly in the industry that you're in, the working conditions and the wages and everything of other crafts, of other people, even if they're outside of your union, has a direct impact on you and your members. And so it's important, even just from a self-interest perspective, to do everything that we can to support one another in our various fights. So that was awesome.
Yeah, I quite enjoyed it. And like you said, I really appreciate the spirit of solidarity because you are right. There are some union folks, unfortunately, who do think of things very insular. They think about just what's happening inside their local. They don't want to even, in some cases, you have locals who won't even cooperate with other locals of their same union, much less other unions in the area, or, and so that always is mind-blowing because the whole concept of unions is strength in numbers. We come together and we're stronger because we do that. So really, I appreciate his leadership there and look forward to Animation Guild getting a great contract that they deserve.
Yeah, absolutely. Teamsters 630 Dairy Workers gives a thumbs up to that clip. Steve said, and this is important to note, that SAG video game actors are on strike right now, and ACTRA, the Canadian version of SAG, has been on strike against commercial companies for about 2 years. And that's true, and we actually heard from one of those strikers at Labor Notes. I don't know if you remember that, Adam, but in the closing plenary, they had one of the commercial actors from Canada's Actors Union speak, and they've been on strike for almost 2 years. And Jada in the chat says chills. Wow, yeah, absolutely. I got a little bit emotional almost the first time that I listened to it. A couple of comments in the chat from earlier in the program from Quirky Geek Girl. Good morning from Toronto. Very curious to hear your thoughts on union leaders that spoke on the first night of the DNC. I think largely good. I think some of it may have been, I don't know. It's just it's difficult to me sometimes to listen to the effusive praise of politicians from people in our movement. But I guess that's kind of the game that some people at least feel that you have to play. So
doesn't bother me too much, but it's not exactly what I would do. But a lot of it was good, and hearing the messages about, and Sean Fain's direct calling out of Stellantis in particular was really good, talking about how they would be, they're going to strike if necessary to protect the Belvedere investment that Stellantis agreed to in the contract negotiations. We're going to be talking about that some later in the program. And some of the other stuff, and we might be talking about Sean O'Brien and his kind of weirdness around the DNC. I think he thinks that he's the only labor leader that exists, and he is not. There were, probably, honestly, like a dozen labor leaders speaking at the DNC. It was a lot. Even outside of the first night, my national union president, Reverend Everett Kelly, gave the invocation on the final night of the DNC. It was pretty good. It was a good invocation, but Kelly's a really good speaker. If you've ever heard him, you know that. And another, Alex says, "Good morning, y'all. It's already toastier than hell here in Texas. Hope everybody is doing well and staying tuned and staying cool." Yeah, it is. I was in Texas yesterday, and it was terrible. I mean, it was basically the same as it's been in Alabama, but it's been terrible.
Well,
it's been so
I just
hot.
heard reports, or we heard from our Teamster brother locally about some heat-related deaths in Texas with UPS drivers. So, yeah, it's definitely something to keep your eye on.
Absolutely, and be safe. So what happened, I can't remember if there was another incident or if this worker ended up dying, but there was a UPS driver out in Texas who had who crashed and got sent to the hospital. I think I've seen mixed things about whether or not he made it, but he crashed because he passed out from a heat-related illness because and he called his management and I think he asked if he could go to the hospital, but management said to go drop off the truck first. And he was on his way to drop off the truck when he passed out and crashed and at the very least sustained life-threatening injuries because of management's greed. And so you gotta make sure that you do, like, if you're working out there in this really just oppressive heat, you need to make sure that you're being safe. Management does not care about you, is not going to take care of you. You need to make sure that you are safe. And particularly if you are a union member, you have a union contract, you need to, read the contract, make sure that you're doing everything that you can to protect yourself as it relates to your job. But it's much more important to protect yourself as it relates to your life. Because the worst case scenario, if you are too careful about it, you get disciplined or even ultimately terminated on your job, but you can get another job. The worst case scenario, if you don't do that, is that you die. And it's very, very scary, very scary kind of stuff. And folks really need to look out for themselves, look out for people that you're working with, make sure everybody's staying safe because, I mean, this heat is dangerous and scary and people need to, act accordingly. Will in the chat says, one thing all workers have in common is the threat of automation and AI. It's coming and we need to start talking about what we are going to do. My union actually just formed a committee on AI. AFGE did. I'm interested in looking into that more and maybe even having somebody from AFGE on the program. Alex said, yes, my fellow 767 Teamster. Management told him to bring the truck back. Bingo Bango 89 says, as a Teamster, I wish we had leadership like Sean Fain. And the Teamsters dairy workers did like an emoji of the monkey covering their eyes, like I think kind of embarrassed. Will says, we need class struggle unionism in the Teamsters. We need class struggle unionism everywhere, I think. That's my opinion. Have we got Stephen in the Zoom?
We sure do.
Fantastic. I'm so excited for this conversation. Stephen J. Silva is a professor at American University's School of International Service and an affiliate professor in American University's Economics Department. He teaches international economics, international trade relations, and comparative politics. He is also the author of the UAW's Southern Gamble, and he is our next guest. Professor, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jacob. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. Yeah, go ahead.
No, fine. Keep going.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I've been really looking forward to this conversation since I read your book. I actually got it as a gift from my national organizing director in AFGE. I happened to visit with him while I was in D.C. for work a couple of months ago, and I read it very quickly. It was a very good book, and I mean, very comprehensive. There's a lot of detail in the book that I even wonder if some of it is like breaking as in never been seen before. If you know of anything that was in the book that had never been published before, I would be interested if you were like breaking news with that book. But it was published last year, and I would recommend folks read it. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the conversation. Appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Sure, great to be here. There are a few things that I think had never been seen before. One thing that I would say would be there was this whole period in the 1980s where the UAW, after they had the initial losses in trying to organize at Nissan and in Honda in Marysville, Ohio, they didn't even try. They almost did an election, but then they pulled back in the last minute. And the UAW then went to several PR firms, and they spoke to the PR firms, and the PR firms gave them advice on how to organize Southern workers, workers in Japanese plants. And they first went to one, and in this company, it looked more like they just wanted to make a lot of money because they had this huge bill for this massive PR campaign they wanted to do. And then they went to a second PR firm that had done a lot of stuff with labor already. But even that one, in the end, the whole story closes out with the president of the UAW at the time, Owen Bieber. He had a sticky note on the report, and his aide, Dick Shoemaker, also had a sticky note on the report. And so Dick Shoemaker basically says on his sticky note, "We don't need these people. We know what to do." And then Owen Bieber's sticky note said, "Agreed, file." So, whether or not drawing on a PR firm would have made a difference, I'm doubtful about that. But at the same time, I think, the evidence of history shows they didn't know what to do either. And it's only in this year that we've had a transplant in the South organized.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I thought that was a fun story to see, and I did enjoy reading. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of kind of the PR companies. I'm sure there are some that do good work, and there's some that could be genuinely helpful and have good kind of political instinct for like what we're trying to do. But my instinct is that a lot of PR firms are more, they're not really interested in the supporting organizing. They're, like you said, they're interested in making money for themselves, or not organizing stuff. And so I have a similar instinct.
They're going to bring a campaign that they use to sell toothpaste or or soap or something, and that isn't going to work.
Right. Yeah. It's because unionism is not, in my view, a product to be sold. We're not selling insurance. We are trying to convince workers to recognize their power and make use of it and to organize together. We are, we're not like, it's not a product. And I think that the kind of history of the labor movement has shown that in eras where we don't treat it like a product we're trying to sell, we treat it like, we are organizing together, recognizing our power and leveraging it and doing that for ourselves and for our communities. Seems like that's kind of the thing that has been more successful than the kind of like trying to make unions like super palatable or whatever, or selling it like a product, like you said. So I guess, a good thing a good place to start would be a broad overview of the UAW's history, to kind of set the stage for your book, which really dives in on the last 35 years or so. A broad overview of the UAW's history, its rise kind of contrasted with its subsequent stagnation and decline? Can you just give us that broad outline?
Sure. So the UAW was founded in 1935. It was founded as an industrial union for auto workers. And it was right at that point when there was the big split in the American Federation of Labor. And the UAW was initially constituted as an AFL union, but John L. Lewis took several unions out to form what was the Committee of Industrial Organizations and then become the Congress of Industrial Organizations. And that happened a year later in 1936. And the UAW was one of the unions that came out with the mine workers, Amalgamated Clothing and Textile Workers, the Steel Workers Organizing Committee, the International Typographical Workers Union. So they all set up a rival union confederation. And then in that year, 1936, the UAW really began a militant campaign, and they had a lesser known sit-down strike at a GM plant in Atlanta that happened in 1936. And that was the first GM plant that was organized by the UAW. And then at the very end of 1936 and into 1937, they had the much more famous Flint sit-down strike in Flint, Michigan. And that ultimately led to General Motors getting organized. And then a year later, they organized Chrysler. And it took a while with Ford because Henry Ford was very anti-union. But when the buildup for World War II started, it became pretty clear at the time with Franklin Roosevelt as president that Ford wasn't going to get any military contracts unless it recognized the UAW. So in 1941, Ford recognized the UAW. So at that point, the UAW, there were other companies as well, like American Motors and a few others that don't exist now. But by that point, by World War II, the UAW had organized all of the car plants in the United States. And another thing to note in that early period is that the internal politics of the UAW were pretty rough and tumble, that you had different factions within the UAW that duked it out for about 10 years. The first president of the UAW was Homer Martin, who was sort of really, he was more of a fundamentalist and didn't really have an ideological position beyond that. And in 1938, the left wing of the UAW managed to dominate and get the person who they wanted in, a guy named R.J. Thomas. And he wasn't a communist, but most of his support was from the Communist Party of the U.S. And there was a fight then between R.J. Thomas and a social democratic wing of the UAW, which was headed by Walter Reuther and his brothers. And in the end, Walter Reuther manages to become president of the UAW in 1946. And this period shaped a lot of the internal politics of the UAW because it was so brutal as a battle. Once the Reuther faction managed to get a hold of the presidency, they set up a lot of structures that locked things in so that it was very difficult to remove them. In fact, Sean Fain is the first president who is not from the Reuther faction, since that 1946 victory by Walter Reuther and his brothers taking over the UAW. So it meant that internal democracy within the UAW was not its strong suit, to put it kindly. But that said, the UAW has always been a progressive voice within the U.S. labor movement that During the 1950s, the UAW backed the civil rights campaigns and continued to do so into the 1960s. The biggest single financial contributor to Martin Luther King's March on Washington was the UAW. In fact, if you look at the pictures of the signs from those marches or from that big march, you can see they're basically UAW signs that have it with the UAW print style and everything. So the UAW was very important in that. The UAW was highly critical eventually of the Vietnam War. And you had a lot of tension within the labor movement at that point. You had a more conservative faction around the president of the AFL-CIO, George Meany, and Walter Reuther, who was more progressive. Now, Walter Reuther died in a plane crash in 1970. He was flying to northern Michigan and the plane crashed. And so this led to a sudden crisis within the union in pulling itself together. But successors of Walter Reuther from the Reuther Caucus, as it's been called, it's had two names, Administrative Caucus and Reuther Caucus, that they then became the successive presidents of the UAW until we get to Shawn Fain. But it was really at this early 70s point where the UAW reached its pinnacle and began to decline. I should say a couple things also on just what they did in collective bargaining. They were very innovative in a number of areas, that they got supplemental unemployment benefits. That meant that if you were unemployed, and that would happen particularly in autos, there'd be layoffs for plant changeover and things, that not only did you get government unemployment benefits, but the companies paid into a fund to supplement the unemployment benefits that you got, and a number of other things in terms of paid holidays. And they also got protections for layoffs, that you would remain employed. So there are a number of the big benefits that happened. Cost of living adjustment was a UAW innovation. So an extra clause in your contract that not only would you get what was negotiated, but you would get also whatever the inflation rate was, that would automatically be added. And that was something that was taken away in the late 70s, early 80s, and Shawn Fain ultimately got it back last year. So there's a good 20 years where that was missing. But the 1970s proved to be difficult for the UAW. First, you had the oil shocks, the oil embargoes that happened in the 1970s. There were two big ones, one 73, 74, and then 78, 79. And that led to the price of gas going up, which was really difficult for the auto industry because sales fell, and it led to a lot of layoffs. The other thing that you had is you began to get foreign auto plants, first foreign auto imports in the 60s, and then in the 70s, they really accelerated, which again caused layoffs and displacement in the industry for the unionized sector. And then you had transplants, foreign-owned auto plants start to arrive. The first one was actually Volkswagen in Pennsylvania, which they ultimately closed down in the 80s. And then the Japanese plants started coming in the late 70s and early 80s. And you have a period of retrenchment and decline in membership, in share of automobile output in the US that's made by unionized workers. And then you get to the real low point, I would say, was the corruption scandals that happened in the second half of the 2010s, where there was high-level figures, including two UAW presidents, were convicted of corruption, taking money from the companies, Chrysler in particular, and also taking money from the UAW itself. And that was the low point for the union. And then after that, there was sort of a cleanup period for a bit where you had a couple of presidents, and then there was a settlement with the United States Department of Justice that led to Shawn Fain ultimately being elected president of the UAW. That there was first a referendum. Would you move? Would the UAW adopt a one union member, one vote system to pick the president of the union and move away from the traditional union convention picking the president? And the members voted for a one member, one vote direct election of the president and the International Executive Board. And then there were the elections that took place in 22, and then there was it had to be a second round of elections because nobody got a majority in 23, spring of 23. And that's when Shawn Fain won by a little over 600 votes against his opponent, Ray Curry. And then once that happened, Shawn Fain then was in place to do the strategy to have the stand-up strike of 2023. And, there's obvious the play on the name stand-up strike from the very beginnings of the UAW, where it was the sit-down strikes that led to the UAW really getting its first footing in the auto industry and the successes there. And then that rolling into the organizing drives that we've seen at the transplant companies over the past year. So that's a sort of brief Cliff Notes history of the UAW.
I think that was a really great, that tracks with most of the high points, the important things that you would put on a timeline. I think that was a really great, kind of 5-10 minute history for the UAW. And it's interesting that Fain, like you mentioned, is the first president since Reuther not to come out of the Reuther caucus, or the administration caucus as it was later called. But he clearly and explicitly wants to be a Reuther-like figure. I mean, he talks about Reuther being, kind of one of the people that he styles himself after, that he would like to be a modern day equivalent of a Walter Reuther, hopefully in the good ways. There were a lot, Reuther is not an unambiguously good figure. Like you said, he put up some very, very strong protections for his caucus against intervention from any other wings of the UAW, anybody with differing opinions, and made it ultimately into a very kind of top-down union, and purged a lot of the left-wing elements from the UAW. Some would argue, not coincidentally, right before the decline. Some would say it wasn't a factor, but I'll leave people to judge that for themselves. So hopefully, he takes from the good and not the bad.
Right.
But you mentioned the warehouse Volkswagen. West Morehouse Volkswagen plant in Pennsylvania, and folks can read more about that in your book. But it's interesting that in subsequent campaigns that the UAW had, people pointed to that as a reason to be skeptical of the UAW, because they were blaming the closing of the facility on the UAW. But you point out that at the time that nobody was making that argument, not even management was making that argument. Everybody understood it was management's fault. They were not making the right kind of business decisions, and so they were not able to make the plant profitable, and so they closed it. And just one other comment on kind of that history. You mentioned briefly Homer Martin. He was an interesting figure. You don't talk about him too much in your book. I'd recommend folks read a couple of other books about the UAW. The Many and the Few is a good book about the sit-down strikes of 1937. There's some about Homer Martin in there. And there was another book that I read about the UAW. I can't remember what it was, but he was an interesting fellow. He was a preacher, and reportedly a great orator, but ultimately totally inept as an executive and administrative figure in the union, and finally was, like you said, voted out. But then after he was voted out, he founded a competitor to the UAW with the AFL after the CIO split, in close coordination with raging anti-Semite Father Coughlin, who previous to that was more kind of ambiguous and had some pro-labor kind of stuff, but ultimately delved completely into fascism and was not a great look for the AFL. But folks should read more about that too. Homer Martin, interesting guy. So with those with those comments about that, I just wanted to put that out there for folks.
Sure.
I wanted
book American Vanguard is a pretty good book about the UAW that really covers its history. So that's another one. And then there's the Brothers Ruther. There's The Most Dangerous Man in Detroit, which is a story about Ruther. So there are some very good books about the UAW.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Brothers Ruther, some people may not realize this. There was 3 of them. There were 3 Ruthers, and there was an account. I don't know if it's apocryphal or not, but of Walter or one of the Ruthers being in like negotiations with the company, and immediately outside, a second Ruther was manning a big like amplification van, like he had a big bullhorn, and he was he was like standing on top of a car, like shouting at a rally. And then somebody comes in and says the third Ruther was leading a strike at some other facility, and the management was like, "By God, how many are you? How many there are you?" It was a pretty funny story. So zooming into the second half of the UAW's history, the stagnation and the decline and the kind of fall of the UAW, a big focus of the UAW over those years was the organization of these foreign automotive manufacturers. Some people, you push back very heavily against the idea that the UAW just sat back and let it happen. That they invested tens of millions of dollars in organizing the South, which I did not know before I read your book. And I'm very appreciative to know that, because it's important to know that they didn't just sit kind of idly by. You can disagree maybe with the strategies and the tactics, but there was real effort put in to organizing the South by the UAW basically over the course of this entire era. And so one question that of course you and I know, but maybe some folks listening might not know, is just why is it important that the UAW organize the foreign automotive manufacturers? Why have they spent so much resources going after this goal, and why should they?
Yeah, it's really helpful for all unions if you can take wages and benefits off the table. Is something that companies compete against one another with. And when the Southern plants came in, certainly the big 3, they would say, there are lower wages at Nissan, there are lower wages at Honda, so we can't pay what you're asking for because we got to compete with those plants. So taking those wages off, out of competition, making, the UAW contract the standard at every single plant gives you the opportunity to have a better contract. So that's why the focus is there.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right, and very succinct. And it's not like it's a business thing because they want the dues money. The dues money is not the important thing for a union to organize these non-union automotive manufacturers. It's to gain leverage in contract negotiations with current organized workplaces, but also, to help because there's a genuine, kind of inclination and logic to organizing other workers. If you are an organized worker, if you're an organized union member, there's a real drive to try to bring everybody in because there's a real logic to that. It's not about, the dues money. There's a lot more to it there. And unfortunately, there are a lot of union members that push back against new organizing, because they see, if you think kind of in the individualistic mindset that a lot of, American media kind of just pounds into you, you see your dues money going to help somebody else, right? Help somebody else organize. And so they do this when they invest in organizing, when unions invest in organizing. Sometimes they do it over the protestations of many of their own members. And so it's, not like super clearly.
That's short-sighted. You have to think that businesses are always going to try to figure out a way to get around you if you have a union contract. And the way that this happened in the automobile industry is this investment in the South. One thing that's worth noting is even before the transplants, General Motors in the 1970s, they did something that was called the Southern Strategy. And so the General Motors executives, they decided they were going to build a whole set of parallel plants in the South. And they did. And the UAW fought hard and organized them, and eventually did organize them. And so this is a common strategy. Boeing did this, that, Boeing used to produce in the Northwest, and then they, set up a whole parallel facility in the South, and it's non-union. And that way they can play off, the machinists who've organized Boeing, they can play them off, and they can say, well, we can produce 20% cheaper at our other plants, so we're not gonna give you the raise that you're asking for. So for unions, union members, you always have to be vigilant about that sort of thing. That your boss is always trying to think of a way to lower costs, and you're one of those costs.
Right.
So the way to avoid the boss being able to do that is have everybody organized.
Exactly. So talk to us about, you mentioned, and like I said, you are very, very forceful in pushing back against the idea that the UAW just, they didn't do anything. They didn't care. There was no investment. Nothing happened. You push back against that idea very hard, and I think, correctly. So can you highlight a couple of those campaigns that stick out in your mind as informative in understanding the different strategies that the UAW had in organizing these southern foreign automotive manufacturers, and some of the differences in tactics and the different results. Notably, they were successful in organizing a lot of the Daimler facilities where they were not at basically anybody else until Volkswagen, like you said, last year. Highlight some of the important campaigns and tactics that you feel like folks ought to know.
Sure. Bringing up the Daimler truck example, what's called Daimler Truck today, is an excellent one. That the German company Daimler, they in the 1980s they bought Freightliner, the Freightliner truck company. And Freightliner was doing precisely one of these parallel plant strategies that Freightliner traditionally produced in Portland, Oregon, and in the Pacific Northwest. But in the 1980s, they started building plants in North Carolina. And Daimler buys up Freightliner, and then shortly thereafter, there's an organizing drive in North Carolina. So the organizing drive unfolds, and one of the things that the UAW did is they went to Germany, and they went and they spoke to the German Metalworkers Union, and then they went and they spoke to the Works Council. Now, German industrial relations is a complex system, but it does matter here when your company is German. You've got two bodies that represent workers in Germany. One is unions, but the other one is a works council. And whereas our unions do the things that both unions and works councils do in Germany they've got a division of labor between works councils and unions. So works councils are elected bodies. Workers in a plant, they have an election, and they vote for a set of representatives. And they've got protection in the law. They are not unions, though. They are these elected bodies, and then you have unions, and you may say, well, what do unions do? Well, unions have in Germany, they have the exclusive right to do collective bargaining. Works councils cannot sign contracts that are collective bargaining agreements. Only unions can. And in Germany, collective bargaining typically takes place at the level above a company. So this is something that people have talked about in the US, about having sectoral level bargaining. In essence, you do have that in Germany. But the works councils and the unions, they can sometimes be a bit frenemies as well, that they're both trying to represent the workers and they don't want to poach, the other, each doesn't want the other to dominate it. So there can be a bit of tension between works councils and unions as well. So that's sort of the general German system. And what the UAW did is they spoke to the union, and then they went to Stuttgart in Germany, where Daimler has their headquarters, and they spoke to the head of the Works Council. And the head of the Works Council at the time, he was very forceful in dealing with Daimler management. And he said, if you make trouble for the workers in North Carolina, you're going to have trouble with us in Germany. And they can make trouble, the works councils, even though they don't have the right to strike. They can do a lot of things, work to rule, and a number of things that can make life difficult for management. And so that led, when I'm going to bring us back to North Carolina, the UAW is trying to bargain with Freightliner. They've been trying over a year. Company is just dragging its feet, and eventually the union had to go out on strike to get a contract. And one of the things that enabled them to win that strike was that the company did not hire permanent replacements. So part of it definitely was the pressure from the German workers' representatives, from the Works Council in particular, that led Daimler not to hire permanent replacements, and eventually they won the strike and they got a contract. So this is another element you can see where international solidarity, it's really hard to do, and a lot of my book shows how often it doesn't work, but it can work, and when it does work, it can be very powerful. Now, the other piece of another one case that I'd bring up that would be a Sean Fain, even a pre-Bob King effort to organize when Bob King was president of the UAW, was the initial efforts to organize at Nissan. Nissan set up a plant in Smyrna, Tennessee, and they hired a former Ford executive, guy by the name of Marvin Runyon. He originally is from Texas. He really didn't like unions at all. And when he came in and became the CEO for Nissan North America, he really developed a strategy to try to make it very, very hard for unions to organize. And it's something that I call in the book, the union avoidance playbook. And it's something that's used certainly outside of the auto sector. And all of the plays Marvin Runyon did not develop, but he really added to the playbook and codified it in a way that made it very effective. And, so among the plays that are in this playbook is locating a plant in rural areas. And if you put a plant in a rural area, it means there are fewer people with experience with unions, or family members with experience with unions. And it's really hard to bring people together if they're commuting to this plant from a 100-mile radius. So that's one. Screening out hires who might be sympathetic to joining a union through questionnaires with, questions that look innocent but really aren't. Like, have you played sports in high school? And questions like, are you firstborn? And who knew that firstborns tend to be less sympathetic to joining unions than people like me, who was third in a family of 6. So interesting, interesting little fact. The other thing is Runyon was among the people who really used the breakdown of using temp workers for a big share of the workforce in order to minimize unionization. Fourth thing that Runyon did was bringing in TV monitors to broadcast company propaganda in the break rooms, in the changing rooms, everywhere. Another thing that Marvin Runyon did is donate lavishly to not just politicians, but to churches and charities, so that if somebody wanted to do an organizing drive and they go to the local church and they say, can we use your hall? That the pastor would think, well, boy, Nissan paid for replacing my roof last year. Do I really want to host a union meeting? And so these sorts of tactics were very effective in laying a groundwork for making it hard to organize a union. And this is even, beyond what happens if a drive starts. And if a drive starts, the first thing that happens is hiring a union avoidance firm and then launching the whole process of captive audience meetings and one-on-one meetings and, that whole thing, which I'm sure many of your listeners have experienced. And so this is something that in the Nissan campaign developed. And once you start having the union avoidance law firms, the union busting law firms, is they start they move from one company to another, and they spread all these tactics within the auto industry and outside of the auto industry. So now this is standard practice throughout, not just the South, but throughout the country whenever an organizing drive happens.
Right. Yeah, and that's you mentioned about the Works Council in Germany and how that was elected, and something that I like to point out when I think that we should have maybe some similar dynamic because this Works Council law, that these elections take place in Germany once a company has reached like X amount of employees. And I think that we should have something like that in the United States where, collective bargaining is basically mandated. You can, the people can affiliate with the union or not. And we've actually done that before in World War II. The National War Labor Board did something similar, and companies that wanted to do like defense, they had to engage in collective bargaining. And there was actually I was reading one book, and there's this picture of this CEO literally being carried out of his plant by like the National Guard because the government nationalized his company because he refused to bargain with the elected representatives through the mechanisms of the National War Labor Board. It was, really cool picture, I thought. But yeah, and then you mentioned the company propaganda at Nissan. They call it, I don't know if they still have it, but they called it in your book the Nissan News Network, which is just wild. And you said that you see this kind of stuff all the time, even today. And we had there's been some organizing activity at the Hyundai plant in Montgomery, and there was a big preacher locally that has been publicly antagonistic to the union, been writing op-eds in right-wing and non-right-wing outlets across the state about how folks shouldn't organize with the UAW. And believe it or not, Hyundai has donated to him and his church and sponsored like mission trips for them and all that kind of stuff. And at Mercedes in Tuscaloosa, there was a preacher running around literally on the shop floor. Mercedes allowed a preacher, not an employee, who was also a city councilor, to run around and talk to individual employees, pull them off the line, and try to convince them not to unionize. I mean, really blatant kind of stuff. And so with the development of this anti-union playbook, and a lot of it comes from Marvin Runyon and kind of his group, what did the UAW do? What were some of the tactics that they employed to try to fight back against that?
Yeah, there's one thing I want to mention before answering that question, and that is with the notion of works councils. I think they've been very effective in Germany in giving the workers like two places at the table. And not only do they have a works council, but they have on big companies half the seats on the company board as part of this system the Germans call co-determination. However, one has to be very careful because there are senators like Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance who are saying, we want works councils for the United States, but they're not really talking about the German system with works councils in the plants and the unions well established through sectoral level collective bargaining. They're really talking about something that would be a company union. So, for people out there, you got to have a bit of buyer beware. If you've got some selling of works councils for the U.S., sometimes it's just they want to change the law to make it possible to have company unions again. So you really have to look under the hood and see what's there before you buy onto it. Now, to your question in how to get around the playbook, a lot of, there were different things that were tried at different times. And, Bob King, who eventually became president of the UAW, he was pretty innovative and he really did a lot of experimentation. The UAW was one of the first unions to use cell phones when cell phones were new to coordinate their organizing drive. They were also one of the first unions to use computers to try to coordinate their drives. So you had, trying to use the newest technologies. The other things when Bob King was president that he tried, there were two things that I think stand out. One, he really tried to cut a deal with German management to try to play on German management. German management had signed all these international agreements recognizing the right to bargain, the right to have unions, and really tried to get them to follow the more cooperative system. They call it social partnership in Germany, and to bring that to the US. And in the end, it didn't, this sort of trying to do things over the top and trying to make arguments, which are sound arguments, that union rights are civil rights, are human rights, and to try to basically shame German management into respecting workers' rights like they do in Germany. That's what he tried, and it's a complex story. In 2014, Volkswagen management was sort of willing to come along with that. The Mercedes management was less, really did oppose all that, but eventually that didn't work. The other thing that Bob King did for a Nissan plant, their third major plant, which was in Canton, Mississippi, their second assembly plant, that he sort of spearheaded a civil rights campaign to try to stress, workers' rights or civil rights, and to organize with the civil rights leadership in Mississippi to organize that plant. Again, it was a top-down approach, and ultimately it didn't work. But as part of it, they brought in Bernie Sanders, they brought in the rapper Common, they brought in Danny Glover, and tried, that sort of more public relations style campaign. But, as I said, in the end, it didn't work.
Right, right. And there was, there were several other things that they have done over the years to try to mix it up. Like you mentioned, they tried at Nissan in Canton, Mississippi to really lean into the civil rights stuff, whereas in other places they kind of tried to be, or they didn't really engage with the community as much. There were different approaches with relationships to management, trying to, work out some sort of election deal versus just, trying to run surprise elections. And ultimately, in every case besides Daimler and besides this different Volkswagen election, or the Volkswagen election just last year, they, like you said, the different tactics were all ultimately unsuccessful. And, one of the thing that I'm interested in your thoughts on, as far as those tactics, is that when reading your book, something that I observed is that I didn't see much about what was actually happening like inside of the plant, right? When I read The Many and the Few about the 1937 sit-down strikes, all so much of the book and the testimony is about like, okay, so and so from this department was talking to so and so in this department, and they were setting up, they were going to do this work stoppage in this way, and they had this plan, and it was all like there was so much about what was going on, like actually internal to the plant, and it seemed to me that a lot of what the focus was on these campaigns was what the UAW was doing outside of the plant, right? Like, are they engaging with civic leaders or not? Are they engaging with international labor or not? Are they trying to, be nice to management or not? Are they putting forward this, persona of like a new, more cooperative UAW or not, right? I didn't feel like I got a super great sense of what was going on inside the plant. Like, how did they create the committee? How did they structure organizing conversations? How did they talk to other workers? Did they map the workplace, right? And so was that a limitation of the UAW's archives? Like, you just couldn't find stuff like that? Or do you feel like the UAW itself didn't focus on the kind of internal plant stuff? I'm interested in your reaction to that observation, at least, that the perception that I had.
Yeah, I'd say a couple things. One, the UAW, since the 1940s, didn't really engage in a great deal of grassroots bottom-up organizing. That, there'd be a new auto plant built, they'd have neutrality and card check, they'd have an election, they'd win, so General Motors or Ford built a plant elsewhere. At various points, they did some things with parts suppliers, but again, the UAW did more of an over-the-top approach where they would go to Ford and say, look, we want you to lean on the parts suppliers to do card check and neutrality. And so their grassroots organizing muscles were really atrophied. And in practice, they did, again, top down as a structure. They would send in organizers, and the organizers would be the ones who would be calling most of the shots. And this is something that various people at Daimler, at Mercedes, MBUSI, in Alabama talked about, that the difference between the campaign this year and previous campaigns, that the UAW had like a one-size-fits-all pattern, and it would be unrolled in the workplace. So I think that was one of the weaknesses in the campaign. So a couple of areas where I think you can see some things where there was some innovation, and in this period was the idea of founding locals even after the losses and this happened at Volkswagen and at Mercedes, that they founded locals, and those locals continued to exist even after the losses. And so that gave a place for people who were supportive of the union to focus and to act and to react when things happened in the company. They were already, a couple steps ahead as far as being able to have a coordinated response. So I think that has a lot to do with it. That this emphasis on the membership wasn't there until now. And I think one of the things that's changed with the UAW, with Brian Shepard becoming the new organizing director, is he's doing more of a bottom-up approach, like what he did when he was with the Service Employees International Union, in really communicating, you are the union, you have to organize this. And it won't succeed without you. And a lot of the people, particularly at the Mercedes plant, really noticed the difference and said that made a huge difference in the election this year compared to in the past, where in the past they never had enough cards signed to even go forward with an election. But that change to a more grassroots approach made a huge difference. And of course, any of you who've been involved in these, the first time you try this, you make mistakes and you learn and you figure out how to do it better the next time. And I think there was a lot of learning that happened in Vance on how to move forward with another round of this. The second thing that I would say this is sort of a segueing into, well, why were things more successful this time at Volkswagen? Obviously they won the election, and in Mercedes, in Vance, Alabama, that they managed to get 43% of the vote. One of the things, when you look at Volkswagen in particular, that I think made a huge difference, I'd say two things to point to. One, the foundation of the people who were pro-union remained strong and stayed in place and persisted. And they developed a good leadership. Steve Cochran has been very good as president of the local. And so I think that residual that remained gave something to build on. So when you try again, you're not starting from scratch. So I think that was important in Volkswagen. The other thing that was important in Volkswagen is actually changes that happened in Germany. I mentioned that the Works Council union relationship can sometimes be a frenemies relationship. And this was the case in the earlier organizing drives, that the old head of the Works Council in Germany really was skeptical about the UAW and didn't really want to devote a lot of time and effort or support. But he actually moved on and got himself a management job. But his successor, she's been fantastic. And Daniela Cavallo. And when the UAW went to the Works Council, she basically said, yeah, we're going to come out, we're going to tell management, not only do we support the union, but we're going to say to management, no captive audience speeches, no union busting law firm, or you're going to have trouble with us. And when the Works Council in Germany stepped up really went to bat for the UAW, that tore several pages out of the union avoidance playbook, and that helped a lot as well.
Right. And so, it seems like you think that a lot of the reason the the recent campaigns have been at least more successful is because there has been more of a focus on actually what's going on in the shop maybe than there had been before. And in your book, it seemed like you believe that there was a that outside intervention also played a really large role in at least some of the campaigns, and in particular, you point to Volkswagen in, I think, 2014, when Volkswagen had a neutrality agreement with the UAW, and they were actually, if you read the book, it's kind of astounding how cooperative they were with the UAW and how much access they allowed the UAW inside the plant. But the outside entities were. There was a very similar campaign to what happened at Mercedes this year. There were op-eds, there were speeches, there was a governor, really attacking the idea of unionization. And you felt like where it was deployed, the outside intervention was very, very meaningful. And, we've had Michael Goldfield on the program before, and I don't know, you respect his work and he respects yours, but he disagrees with the idea that outside intervention is very meaningful. And like as at least one example, he'll point to a unionization campaign. I forget what the industry was, but it was in Mississippi, where the governor, the senator came and threatened, to like explicitly threatening to take away incentives and to close the plant if they unionize, and they still unionized. It was like 80-20 or 70-30. It's overwhelming, but it was in like the 50s or 60s, I think, this example that he points to. And so he's just kind of skeptical of the idea that that the outside intervention is very meaningful. And even like, in my own conversations with the folks at Mercedes, they had a similar opinion. They didn't feel like the outside campaign, even as huge as it was very meaningful. They felt like, if anything, it turned people towards the union. Like they were not happy about the idea of these politicians telling them how they should vote in a union election. I'm interested in how you kind of think about that, about the outside intervention and the idea that, like, how does that affect union elections in your view?
I think it can matter. I think, and it has mattered. I think the Volkswagen 2014 representation election really stands out as an instance where it mattered. And it can matter in subtle ways as well as explicit ways. And the subtle way is that as the state governments have been giving more and more and more subsidies to build a plant, upwards to $500 million of state tax monies going to build these plants, that it gives the politicians leverage to shape how the foreign managers react. It really constrains how they react. And I think this is, I think there's a difference between the 40s and 50s, the period that Michael Goldfield covers, in the 90s and beyond, in the period that I cover, in that regard, because of just the massive volume of subsidies that you can see it making a difference in several places. Like you have Volkswagen management refusing to do card check, and there are letters that I managed to get a hold of between the two senators of Tennessee and the CEO of Volkswagen, where they said, remember, when we said we were going to give you all these subsidies, you said you weren't going to let the UAW in this plant. And so we want to make sure that you hold to this bargain. So there are a few smoking guns about this that I think stand out as the intervention having some effect. I think in the early days, when the governor of, I think in the 2019 election, the governor of Tennessee holding a captive audience meeting in the plant, that had an impact. And when you spoke to people, Volkswagen workers, they said, yeah, that sort of really changed the tone of things. That there are times when it can have an effect. I think what's happened, I agree with you that at Mercedes this year, that the outside efforts had a minimal impact. I think because the surprise of this in the novelty of it has worn off in some ways, and so it can vary, and one can overstate it. But I do think there are specific cases, and I think particularly in Volkswagen, where you see the evidence of it. And there's one other thing that I'd mention in an indirect way. There's something that happens in almost every single one of these organizing drives, and that is an organizing drive will start, and all of a sudden there's an anti-UAW group of workers, and they have a website. They've got all sorts of resources that, and when you ask them, where does this come from? That they say, oh, it's employee donations. But when you track it down a bit farther, there is a lot more that's going on. There's local chamber of commerce, state chamber of commerce, business associations, and other sort of nefarious characters that fund these campaigns and roll them out. And even it goes beyond the local, because these campaigns, I'm sure many of your listeners have seen them, they look very, very similar, like there's a pattern. And so it's this one, I don't have a smoking gun. It's one that I continue to look for of union busting firms is where is the place to look to find hard evidence. But I think there's a lot. I think that's one of the plays is sort of under the table funding these anti-worker in-plant drives. That they're always able to find some of the employees in the plant that are willing to engage in anti-union activity. When a drive happens.
Professor, I just realized we're at an hour already. I am sorry. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I do have two more questions if you have the time.
Sure,
is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. Apologies. I've been enjoying the conversation. Appreciate you being generous with your time. I want to backtrack a little bit and go back to the pre-Fein days and one of the tactics that the UAW employed when they were trying to organize some of the southern facilities. And that was the new UAW. I mean, we've been hearing about a new UAW now and under Shawn Fain, but they use that language again, additionally, like 10, 20 years ago, I think under Bob King. And the new UAW, they meant it in that way, almost in literally the exact opposite of the way that it's being used now. That is, the new UAW is more cooperative with management. It is less adversarial. We want to be partners in production. We want to be team members with management. That's the new UAW. So how do you think that strategy played at the time in the South? I think I think there's a lot of credit going to the UAW right now for being kind of the exact opposite of that and crediting that to their victories. But would a UAW that was more militant have had the same success that we're seeing today 15, 10, 20 years ago? I mean, do you think that at that time, the new UAW, in the way that they meant it, was that the best they could have done, or should they have been doing something more like we're seeing now?
So it's a very good question, and it gets into a larger question about militancy as a tactic. And I think militancy is an extremely important tactic, and many breakthroughs, the bulk of the breakthroughs the labor movement has made in the century and a half since it's really been around have been through militancy. But that said, you have to be very careful that one can think of the like Patco, the air traffic controllers, that they took a militant stance but were vulnerable because they could be fired as government employees. And so you've got to have that foundation to be able to deal with whatever the counterattack is going to be. And I think the moment we're in, given the labor market, given sort of the greater insulation that the North American auto industry has from overseas competition compared to the 1970s and 80s, that I think with the tight labor market, and that I think that this was an opportunity to engage in militancy. I have a great deal of respect for Bob King. And I think Bob King was really trying something that made sense to try when he tried it. And that was to try to convince particularly the German companies to do what they do in Germany and to recognize the union. And he was trying to do an exchange. What he was trying to say is, we will give you what the Germans call social partnership. And that's why even in 2014, he talked about creating, they actually made an agreement to create a works council at Volkswagen that would be done through a collective bargaining agreement rather than law. And so, and Bob King, before he was president of the UAW, and even while he was president, he was on the board for the GM subsidiary in Germany, Opel. GM sold them off after the financial crisis. And so, but the thing to recognize is when Bob King became president in 2010, that was right after the financial crisis, right after a big wave of layoffs that had happened in the auto industry. So he did not have the tight labor market that we have now. And so I think he had a weaker hand to play, and he tried to play it as best he could. But and I think if he had been militant in that period with still union members being laid off, I'm not sure it would have worked. I think it would have, so I think the lesson is you always need militancy, but militancy 100% of the time, it isn't a good strategy either. You really got to know how to read your circumstance and seize the moment when the moment's there. And that's what Sean Fain has done. But don't be like Wile E. Coyote and run out off the cliff and then find out there's no ground there and then fall. So, which is what Patco did.
Right. Yeah, there was we had on a fellow a few months ago who was in the UAW, wrote a book about some of his experiences organizing as a militant left-winger socialist in the 70s and 80s, and there was actually a story that he recounts in his book about how he voted to, as a member of the negotiating committee, to accept concessions, for the company, because exactly kind of like you just laid out, he didn't feel like the company was not bluffing. If they didn't accept these concessions, there really would be consequences. People really would lose their jobs, and this was the only thing that they could do in the moment. And he talks about how you have to kind of walk that line, and so I think that there are good lessons to be learned there. And so finally, we've been talking about the Fain administration through the throughout the conversation, but explicitly, let's focus on, I'm interested in your thoughts on it as a, as an entity and as a moment that we are in. Is the Fain administration, you believe, genuinely the beginning of a rise that we'll see from the UAW that's going to be kind of as consequential as the original organization of the auto industry?
I would say that the opening at Volkswagen is an opportunity that goes beyond that one plant. And it really is getting, the foot in the door that should allow the UAW, if it plays its cards right, to pick up 3 more plants. Volkswagen just bought Rivian, the electric truck company, and Volkswagen is building a Scout plant. So Scout is an old nameplate. It's a defunct nameplate. And basically, Volkswagen wants to build a competitive vehicle to Range Rovers and things like that, and use this Scout nameplate, which is a US nameplate. And they're building a plant in South Carolina. They're also building a battery plant in South Carolina. So these contract negotiations with Volkswagen in Chattanooga are going to be very important on a number of fronts. One of them is getting a neutrality and card check for any other Volkswagen-owned plants in North America, and at least in the US and Canada. And it's something that means that if the UAW plays its cards right, it should be able to get 4 plants out of the success in Chattanooga. I also think a lesson from Volkswagen is that would apply to Mercedes is how to work the Works Council. I think a second election that would happen at the Mercedes plant, it will be crucial to get the Mercedes Works Council to intervene in the way that the Volkswagen Works Council did, with saying no union busting law firms, no captive audience speeches, and really bring that across. And I think that would make a difference. And it's hard to do things internationally. And I think just the timing was off with the Mercedes Works Council, that they sort of realized what was going on too late in the process. But and so they ultimately supported the UAW, but the union busting, campaign had already begun and everything, and the replacement of the manager had happened. So I think that the UAW has a good shot at getting those German plants and any additional German plants, like the Sprinter plant, which makes the Sprinter trucks in the Carolinas, getting that. So, playing the cards right, Volkswagen can get 6 plants out of this. The challenge is the Japanese plants. The Japanese plants are harder to organize. A year ago, I spent a semester teaching in Japan, and I also went and talked to the folks at Japan Auto Workers, and they just don't have the same sort of institutional setup in Japan to be able to influence Japanese management. So I think the Japanese plants will be harder, and Korean plants as well. And a lot of what will determine whether all the plants can be organized is how it plays out at those Japanese plants. Can the UAW, working with the people on the ground, develop a credible union promotion playbook that they can then deploy elsewhere to help facilitate the unionization of those plants? So I really think it'll swing on that. So, that Alabama Hyundai plant is crucial in this whole process, but it's a working process. And there's, unionization has always been experimentation and successful unionization. So I think the experimentation, innovation, is going to be important. And I hate to leave you with this, but it is too soon to tell at this moment where things are going to go.
Right. Professor Stephen J. Silva, the author of the UAW's Southern Gamble, Organizing Workers at Foreign-Owned Vehicle Plants, a professor at American University. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been great.
Thank you. All right, folks. Wow, that was longer than I thought it would be.
It was really good.
I really enjoyed that, though. That was awesome. I really do. I mean, genuinely recommend folks read the book if you're interested in this sort of thing. There's so much that we did not get to. Could have spent, easily another hour. Lots of good stuff, and like he mentioned, letters that he reprints in the book from politicians to management, between the UAW staff, it's a lot of really cool stuff in the book. The book is the UAW Southern Gamble, Organizing Workers at Foreign-Owned Vehicle Plants. We are actually already at 12:30. Adam, are you good to keep going? You fine with that?
How long you talking, brother?
30 minutes.
I don't have long.
30 minutes to an hour.
No,
that's what I'm thinking. No,
I'm not good to do that. No, I have somewhere to be this afternoon.
All right, let's do.
So take your pick. Take your pick of your favorite segment to do last to wrap it up.
Oh, jeez. Okay. All right. Well, I guess we'll talk about the Stellantis stuff next week. I'm sure there will be more updates on that anyway, and this one will be more funny. So let's talk about Tim Pool. So we've been talking about the UAW, and other people are talking about the UAW, including Tim Pool. Tim Pool reacted to the UAW suing Donald Trump and Elon Musk for threatening to fire striking workers illegally threatening to fire striking workers, violating the law, and all that good stuff. So let's just listen without any more exposition to how he presents this to his audience.
They say the United Auto Workers Union has filed complaints against Donald Trump and Elon Musk, alleging the two advocated for firing striking workers. So what? The former president and the owner of X held a conversation on Musk's platform. This we know. At one point, Trump and Musk were talking about workers who go on strike for better wages. Trump said, if workers go on strike and you say that's okay, you're all gone, so everyone is gone. Under federal law, a company cannot fire its employees if they are on strike, but you don't got to pay them. So there you go. The unfair labor practices charged were filed with the National Labor Relations Board. The UAW said Tuesday, just hours after the discussion, more than 1 million people tuned into the session. Quote, when we say Donald Trump is a scab, this is what we mean. When we say Trump stands against everything our union stands for, this is what we mean, said UAW President Shawn Fain in a news release. Musk himself has been outspoken against unions, criticizing them for creating inequality among employees. Tesla, which is also owned by Musk, is the only auto manufacturer in the U.S. whose workers are not unionized. Bravo, Tesla. Shout out to the workers.
Shout out to the workers. So there you go. I mean, this guy is, he tries to, just like kind of the right, the rest of the folks on the right, try to position themselves as, as a pro-worker guy, as a populist. And here he is, saying, so what, to threatening to fire striking workers, just reminding people that you don't have to pay workers while you're on strike, which is like, that's what a strike is, right? That you're not working, you're not getting paid. Doesn't, not relevant to anything else in the complaint. And then pretends like, oh yeah, it's all the workers' decision. Like that's why they're not unionized at Tesla. That's totally, there's nothing, going on preventing them from unionizing at Tesla. There's no, multiple lawsuits against Tesla specifically for firing workers who are trying to organize, who complain about the conditions and things like that. None of that's going on. It's all like the workers just independently decide like we don't need a union, despite all of the issues that we know are at Tesla. I'm going to go out of order a bit because I just want to show you I want to remind folks, we played this clip on the program before, but I just want to remind folks about some of the conditions that workers have to face working at Tesla, specifically as it relates to safety. Let's play this clip.
Total. In 2015 alone, the rate of serious injury at Tesla's Fremont factory was 102% above the industry average. And in 2016, it was above the average by 82.5%. Tesla claims its 2019 injury rate dropped below the industry average, but the Center for Investigative Reporting found that Tesla underreported its injuries that year. On top of that, California's inspection agency said it couldn't verify Tesla's claims about safety improvements.
Basically, everybody would cut their arms and hands. Sometimes people would bleed off the line and have to run to the bathroom, so it would be a man down, a second person. I would have to stop the line, and once you stop it, if you stop the line there, management come over, would start yelling at you, and they'd be like, why did he cut his hand? What is he doing? Oh, change him out with someone better. Almost like a modern day industrial sweatshop.
Yeah, so not great, and union workplaces are significantly safer than non-union workplaces.
That's a fact.
That's a fact. You can look it up. That's a fact. And so it's just really frustrating, this kind of stuff that these people are allowed to get away with on the right. They're allowed to advocate for firing striking workers. They're allowed to talk about how great it is. Bravo, Tesla, that you have kept your employees from unionizing so far. And then people on the right just allow them to continue to say, oh, I'm on the populist right. I'm a populist. I'm pro-worker. Even as you're advocating firing striking workers. And so Tim Pool goes on this kind of like long exposition about his feelings about unions, particularly as it relates to his own personal experience with them. He's apparently been a member of 2 unions, and he talks about his experience and how much he hated it. And this is about like 2 or 3 minutes, and I wanted to react to this because there's some really revelatory information about Tim Pool as a character, like the way that he sees himself in society, or maybe like not in society. Let's watch this clip.
Let me tell you, my friends, I don't care if someone unionizes. I really don't care. If you want to do it, go through the process, do it. It doesn't mean anything to me at all, right? What I don't like about unions is that they don't do what unions are supposed to do. Collective bargaining is incredible. Employees getting together and saying, hey, guys, we should all...
Collective bargaining is incredible, but so what if people fire striking workers, which is really kind of the crux of collective bargaining, is the ability to go on strike. That's like a huge part of it. I love collective bargaining. Collective bargaining is awesome, but also bosses should be able to fire striking workers. I mean, just really gross stuff. Continue.
Go on strike unless the company meets our demands. I think that is awesome. Collective power, stand up against those. Big fish fighting against a little fish fighting against a big fish. All that stuff's fantastic. That being said, unions don't do these things. That's my problem with unions. They are not.
Do unions not do these things? Really? Have you ever looked at the 990s that unions have to file and the categories of activities that unions perform and what categories all of their expenditures fall under? Have you ever done that? What are you talking about? Unions don't engage in collective bargaining and upholding contracts. What are you talking about? That is just a lie. That is not true.
What do they do?
Exactly.
Is he going to tell us? Oh, I'm sure he's going to tell me.
He's not actually going to tell you what they do, but
I'm curious. I want to know, like in his world where they don't do collective bargaining.
Right. As a union official, I'm
what am I
doing
all day?
Yeah, exactly. What am I doing if not
I'm on the bargaining team? No one told me this.
Yeah. Apparently, you're not supposed to be, unions today don't engage in collective bargaining, despite the fact that you are literally my co-host on this program on a bargaining committee, spending hours and hours and hours bargaining a contract. I am a steward in my union, spending hours and hours and hours filing grievances, investigating grievances, conducting interviews about enforcing the contract. But Tim Pool knows better, and he says that I don't engage in collective. What a dumbass. Literally doesn't know anything. A know nothing. Crazy. Let's continue.
They are not protecting the workers. I have been in 2 different unions, and one was basically meaningless. I worked at a grocery store, was in a union, and they made me join the union. I made something like $40 a day. So paying union dues when I was 18, trying to make money, I'm like, this is insane. How am I supposed to? I'm working every day. Terrible job, stupid job, treated like garbage, and I had to be in the union.
No, you didn't. I'm just going to go ahead and say no.
That's true. He didn't have to be in the union because closed shops have been outlawed by Taft-Hartley, which we should reverse. We should bring back closed shops. But the most that he would have had to have done is pay agency fees, which are less than union dues. But
correct.
It's possible he could have had to pay that. But he did not have to be a member of a union. That's not true. That is just not the case. And frankly, if it weren't for the union, you probably would not have been making $40 a day. You probably would have been making less, actually.
Probably
and
about 30, yeah.
Yeah, you probably would have been making $30 a day. And probably he's talking about the UFCW. We have criticisms of the UFCW. We have talked about reform efforts within the UFCW, but it is better than not having a union at all. In fact, one of my fellow stewards on the job that I'm at right now is a former member of the UFCW, and she still at Kroger, and she has a pension waiting on her from her time working at Kroger because of the union. She has a pension waiting for her from the UFCW because of that, right? So if you work at Kroger for, any amount of time or your work over however long per week, however many hours per week, you get those things additionally on top of the fact that your pay would be lower if you did not have the union. And if you didn't like it, you could have done something about it. You could have participated in your union. You could have been a steward. I would love to know how many union meetings Tim Pool attended when he was a member of presumably the UFCW.
Yeah. Well, I got to say, that's what got me involved was I didn't like what was happening and not happening. And right. I would say that's actually pretty common when you talk to a lot of labor activists. They got involved not because of, what they were, not necessarily because they were like mentored by a leader. Often it was in response to lack of leadership. Exactly. It was, hey, where is the union? We should be doing A, B, and C. Well, I'm going to show up to the meeting and talk about that. Next thing you know, you're a steward.
Yeah, let's continue.
Then I got a job I was a part of the transport workers union when I worked for O'Hare, and they did nothing. They did nothing for me. Because of the union, I was unable to actually advance and try and make a career for myself. So when I was always on time, was never late, passed probation, I got a promotion to be an acting crew chief. It's the step before a full crew chief. Okay. So the way it works is you're a ramp
so pause it just a second. It sounds like actually immediately after probation, he did get a promotion. He did move up in the company. Immediately after probation.
Wait, and that implies there is a non-probationary period. Right. That's something most of us workers in non-union facilities aren't very familiar with because I don't know if Tim realizes this, but the default is at-will employment in most places, particularly here in the South. So, yeah, just having a non-probationary period where you actually have some due process is a pretty radical thing for a lot of folks.
Yep. Let's continue.
You load the bags. You're loading about 5 planes per day. We were working for a regional airline, which are regional jets, Embraers, and CRJs. So about 5 per day, sometimes 4. Not the hardest job in the world. You sit around for about an hour. Your plane comes in. You go work. You wait for 20 or 30 minutes while the plane starts boarding, and then you load the plane back up. Well, I did my job great. Always got everything done. And I said, I am doing a way better job. A lot of these people have complaints. They're lazy. They're burning bags when bags aren't getting when a bag isn't properly loaded on the plane and the plane leaves and the bag's left behind. It's called the burn bag. I never had those problems. And I said, I think I deserve a raise. I go to the supervisor and I ask him, I was like, if I'm doing really well and I'm like working as hard as I can, like what can I do to get a raise? And he goes, talk to the rep. And I was like, okay. So I go to the union rep and I say, what do I do to get a raise? Contract negotiations aren't till next year. And I'm like, no. Like, I want a raise.
Oh.
I want more money. Everyone else is kind of just like going through the motions, but I'm trying to work really hard to get ahead. And they go, that's just not how it works. In this union, I can't speak for all of them, that's not how it works. Contract negotiations happen, and they will determine whether or not you are allowed to get ahead collectively. And then I'm like, wait, hold on.
Did you hear the disdain that he had in his voice for that word?
Okay, all right. Busted. So I have no reason to bust my ass. Okay, all right. I'm going to play video games.
Yeah. I mean, like, I just want folks to kind of, maybe on your own time, rewind that and listen to the absolute disdain with which he said the word collectively. Like, the idea that I should give a shit about anybody other than myself is a totally foreign idea to this guy. And that really kind of explains the trajectory that he went on in his media career and why he, once he got any amount of popularity, he pretty quickly pivoted from being like a cool skateboarding anarchist guy who covered, Occupy Wall Street to being this, right-wing pro-business fire striking workers kind of freak, right? There's no dwelling on that. The idea that like, oh shit, there are people that have been working here for years and years and years. Like, should you just get a raise just because you worked a little bit harder than they did one day or 2 days or even a couple of weeks? Like, you don't think that they had years where they were working harder or they were doing anything like that? I mean, it's just, a super selfish, individualistic kind of mindset that he has that he wants a lot of other people to have. That's the kind of mindset that they want people to have, is you don't want to think about anybody other than yourself. And just one more example of that, he has some thoughts about seniority in general.
People like de-icing because it didn't snow all that often, so you sat around all day doing nothing until it was time to leave. That was a good position, all based on seniority. If you were there for a long time, you got to choose the best job. Well, here's how it works. As an acting crew chief, the job comes up and they say, we have, 12 crew chief positions available and 30 crew chiefs. By seniority, the acting crew chief's never going to get that. So maybe after 10 years of working there, I might actually get to be a full crew chief consistently. De-icing, would be fun. Couldn't get ahead. Nobody wanted to work hard. So I am not a fan, right? That's my personal. So I'm not a fan of how these unions operate. That being said, I actually don't care. Trump saying to fire them if they're on strike, I think you don't need to do that. I think it's stupid that you can't fire people if they're not working, but you don't got to pay them. While they're not working, you hire somebody else. And then they say, oh, you're a scab for doing that. I don't care. That's ridiculous. Anybody who wants to do the job is allowed to do the job. Welcome to the marketplace. I certainly think it's a problem that someone might try to undercut collective bargaining or whatever. But if you've got people who disagree with you, that's called democracy.
I don't care. I don't like the idea of somebody undermining collective bargaining, even though my entire rant has been an individualistic, selfish kind of anti-collective, anti-group screed. But also, scabbing is fine. Deal with it. I mean, just, the idea that people like this can call themselves pro-worker or populist or anything of the sort is just, it's so grating to me. It so grinds my gears. It really gets under my skin.
Well, I will say that, this is kind of a common trope that, you can't get ahead in a union environment, or that, there's no reward for working hard. And
even though he literally, his first sentence after saying that was, I was promoted immediately after my probationary period ended. I mean, and no dwelling on the dissonance between those two thoughts.
Sure. And then, the other thing is, so did you make a proposal to the bargaining team on how to address this?
Right.
It is a democracy, right? That is part of the point, right? You as a member in a democratic institution like a union, you have a voice, and so his reaction was, fine, I'm just not going to work hard anymore. I'm just going to play video games. But other people's reactions may have been different. It could have been, well, is there a way to still honor a structured salary schedule while rewarding individual efforts? Right. Who knows? Maybe there was a way to do that. I don't know. But you're right. The entire thing is about undermining collective bargaining. So it's always frustrating when they slip those comments in there. I'm not against unions. I mean, here's 5 minutes of telling you why I am against unions, but by the way, I'm still not against them.
Right.
I just don't buy it. And I always am confused why folks like this, have attention and get an audience, but, there's an audience for everything. So it's just very frustrating. But, a lot of folks do use those anecdotes of, well, I was in a union one time and it didn't work out well.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you can use that approach for literally anything. Like, I've been out to eat and I've had a bad experience. I didn't swear off restaurants. Okay? I've even gone back to a restaurant after having a bad experience at that particular restaurant, right? Because maybe they had an off night. And, it's always interesting. And I dealt with that a lot recruiting in the field, where people told me, yeah, well, I was a member somewhere else. I didn't really, didn't like it, or I didn't like the rep, or, they didn't have my back, or, I had a bad situation. And again, I just don't see how that helps you overall, individually or collectively, to swear off the one organization that we have to build power in the workplace, because you've had some bad experiences. Right. To your point earlier, I'm very critical of our labor movement in a lot of ways. And, I try to choose my words carefully on the air about that, but I do think we have a lot of room to improve in a lot of our labor unions when it comes to democracy, when it comes to solidarity, when it comes to new organizing, when it comes to our political strategies. There's a lot of room for critique. And the truth is, if you talk to real dedicated unionists, they will have more complaints about unions and union leaders than any of these conservative cranks will. But it's from a different place in our heart. And, because ultimately we see the power of when working people come together and when we organize together and we build institutions together, and how that can help us and help move all of us forward and build a better life for ourselves and our communities. And those are human institutions. And so they're as flawed as the humans inside of them, and as flawed as the humans leading them. But again, you could say that about everything. And, ultimately, it's active engagement, you getting involved, you talking to your coworkers, you building relationships with people, you using the democratic process. That's all important to making these institutions better and vibrant, and be as good as we deserve them to be.
Yep, exactly. Folks, that's going to be it for us today. We'll have a lot more to react to next week. If you have something that you'd like to say, leave us a voicemail, 844-899-TVLR. Please donate to our fundraising drive at tvlr.fm/union2024. Buy some of our new merch on pre-order and some of our current merch that we have in stock, tvlr.fm/store. Subscribe to our newsletters so you can get Last Week in Southern Labor and Boss Watch on Monday and Tuesday, tvlr.fm/contact. And other than that, we'll see you next week, folks.